We're told that love finds us when we're whole, that we must heal ourselves before we deserve another's heart, that our worth must be earned through perfection, through fertility, through the ability to shift into the wolves our ancestors promised we'd become. But when you're born broken in a world that worships strength, when your body refuses the transformation that defines your very humanity, you learn a far more dangerous truth. Some of us are only valued for what we can be discarded from. They call us omegas not because we're cherished, but because we're expendable. I learned this lesson 3 times in my life. Once when my wolf never came and my 18th birthday passed in shameful silence. Twice when the mate bond snapped into place with a man who looked at me like I was a mistake the moon goddess made while drunk. And 3 times when my own father offered me up as payment for a debt, like I was currency instead of his daughter. But the 4th lesson, that one I taught myself, it came on the coldest night of winter when I found a dying wolf bleeding into the snow. And something inside my broken wolfless body whispered, "Save him." Not because I'd be rewarded, not because anyone would care, but because I'd spent my entire life being treated like I was worthless, and I'd be damned if I'd let another creature feel that way, even if it killed me. I carried that wolf 10 miles through a blizzard, and when he opened his eyes in my father's barn and shifted into a man, into a king, everything I thought I knew about power, about worth, about love itself, shattered like ice beneath my feet. This is not a story about a broken omega who got saved. This is a story about the moment I realized I was never the one who needed saving. Before we begin Dorothy and Davian's story, I want to share something special with you. If you love emotional shifter romances like this one, you'll want to check out this book titled Rejected by the Alpha, a glow-up revenge romance that's absolutely captivating. You can see the cover on your screen right now, and I've put the link in the description below. Now, let's dive into our story. Chapter 1: The Weight of Worthlessness. The tavern smelled like shame and wet fur. I'd grown used to that combination over the years. The acrid stench of alcohol mixing with the musk of shifters who'd spent the day running through winter forests, returning to their human forms with that satisfied exhaustion that came from being exactly what they were meant to be. I moved between the tables with my head down, my hands steady as I delivered plates of venison and mugs of ale to wolves who never quite looked at me. Not really. When you can't shift, you become invisible, a ghost haunting the edges of pack life. Another round. Omega. Someone barked from the corner table. I didn't need to look up to know it was Garrett, one of my father's drinking companions. The word Omega had stopped being my name years ago. Now it was just a title that meant lesser, meant serve me, meant you exist to make my life easier. I filled his mug without speaking, my movements practiced and small. I'd learned early that taking up space was dangerous for someone like me, 23 years old and still can't shift. Garrett muttered to his companion, loud enough for me to hear, loud enough for everyone to hear. Roland must have done something terrible in a past life to deserve a daughter like that. My father's name in a stranger's mouth always felt like a slap. Roland Thorne had been a good man once, or so, my mother used to say, before she died, before the shame of having a wolfless daughter had hollowed him out and filled the empty spaces with whiskey and regret. I moved away from Garrett's table, my throat tight. The winter wind howled outside the tavern's walls, rattling the shutters. 3 days now, this blizzard had been building. The kind of cold that killed travelers who didn't respect it. The kind of storm that made even the strongest wolves think twice about running. Dorothy, my actual name, spoken soft. I turned to find Mira, the tavern owner's daughter, gesturing me toward the kitchen. She was one of the few people in Thornridge Pack who still treated me like a person instead of a problem. We'd been friends once, before her first shift had come at 16, and mine hadn't. "Your father's here," she said quietly, her dark eyes apologetic. "He's in the back room with Collector Voss." My stomach dropped. Collector Voss only came to Thornridge for one reason. Someone owed the capital a debt they couldn't pay. And my father had been gambling again. I could see it in the way he'd been avoiding me all week, in the way his hands shook when he thought I wasn't looking. I untied my apron with numb fingers. How bad? Bad enough that Voss brought guards. Mira caught my wrist before I could move past her. Dorothy, maybe you should. It's fine, I lied. But we both knew it wasn't fine. Nothing had been fine for a long time. The back room was small and cold, with a single oil lamp casting shadows across my father's haggarded face. He sat hunched at a wooden table across from Collector Voss, a thin, pale man with the cold eyes of someone who'd learned to value coin over conscience. 2 guards flanked the doorway behind him, their postures rigid and alert. My father wouldn't look at me. "Ah, the daughter," Voss said, his voice carrying the cultured accent of the Capital Wolves. "Dorothy Thorne, 23 years old, Omega classification, unable to shift." He recited my failures like he was reading from a ledger, which I suppose he was. No mate bond, infertile, according to the pack healer report from last spring. Heat crawled up my neck. That report was supposed to be private, the healer had sworn. But nothing was private when you were worthless. Your body became public property. Your shame became entertainment. "I can work off the debt," my father said suddenly, desperately. "Give me 6 months, Collector." You've had 6 months, Roland. And 6 months before that." Voss's fingers drummed against the table. "Your debt to the crown now stands at 3,000 silver marks. That's more than you'll earn in 5 years, even if you stopped drinking long enough to hold consistent employment." 3,000 marks. I felt the number like a physical weight in my chest. That kind of debt didn't get worked off. That kind of debt got you killed, or worse, sent to the labor camps in the north, where shifters mined silver until their bodies gave out. "However," Voss continued, and something in his tone made my skin prickle with warning, "the crown is not without mercy. We understand that circumstances can be difficult, especially for fathers with unmarriable daughters." The room went very still. "There's a household in the capital," Voss said, not looking at me, still addressing my father, like I wasn't standing right there, like I was a thing to be negotiated over, not a person who could speak. "Lord Silas Blackwood's estate. He's looking for staff, Omega, specifically for his personal household." The way he said personal household made my stomach turn. "She'd be fed, clothed, given a room," Voss continued smoothly. "And her service would clear your debt entirely, Roland. All 3,000 marks forgiven. You'd even receive a settlement of 200 marks for your cooperation." My father's head jerked up. For one horrible moment, I saw hope flicker across his face. "No," I heard myself say. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "Father, no, you can't. It would be a 5-year contract," Voss said, still speaking to my father, still pretending I wasn't in the room. "Renewable if both parties agree. Lord Blackwood is a respected member of the capital's high society. She'd want for nothing, except freedom, except dignity, except any pretense that I was anything more than a body to be used." I'd heard the stories about Omegas who went to serve in the capital's noble houses. They came back different, if they came back at all, hollow-eyed and silent, with bruises they wouldn't explain, and a flinch that never quite went away. "Father," I moved around the table, dropping to my knees beside his chair, begging, even though I knew it was useless, even though I could already see the decision hardening in his eyes. "Please, there has to be another way. I'll work more hours at the tavern. I'll wolf." "You're 23 years old, the Dorothy." His voice was flat, defeated, but underneath it, I heard something worse. Relief. "You can't shift. You can't bear children. No wolf will ever mate you." He finally looked at me, and his eyes were the eyes of a stranger. "What kind of future do you have here?" "The kind where I'm not sold," I wanted to scream. "The kind where my own father doesn't trade me like livestock." But I didn't say that because somewhere deep down, I'd known this was coming. From the moment my 18th birthday had passed without a shift, I'd been living on borrowed time, a burden waiting to be discarded. "I'll go," I whispered. The words tasted like ash. My father's shoulders sagged with relief that felt like a blade between my ribs. "Excellent," Voss said, producing a contract from his coat. "We'll need your mark here, Roland. And yours here, girl." I watched my father sign away his daughter with a hand that shook only slightly. When Voss pushed the parchment toward me, I stared at the line where my name should go. 23 years of life, reduced to a signature on a contract that would send me to a fate I couldn't even fully imagine. But what choice did I have? If I refused, they'd send my father to the labor camps. He'd die there within a year. Everyone knew that. At least this way he'd survive. At least this way, one of us got to live. I picked up the quill. My hand moved across the parchment, forming the letters of my name with mechanical precision. Dorothy Thorne, the girl who couldn't shift, the daughter who wasn't worth keeping, the Omega who just signed herself into servitude so her father could clear his gambling debts. The transport leaves in 3 days, Voss said, rolling up the contract with brisk efficiency. Be ready at dawn. You're permitted 1 trunk of personal belongings. Nothing more. 3 days, 72 hours to say goodbye to the only life I'd ever known. I stood on numb legs and left the room without looking at my father again. If I looked at him, I'd see the relief still there. I'd see how glad he was to be rid of me. And if I saw that, something inside me would break in a way I'd never be able to repair. Outside, the blizzard had intensified. Snow fell in thick, blinding sheets, and the wind cut through my thin work dress like knives of ice. I should go back inside, should return to my shift at the tavern, serve drinks to wolves who'd already forgotten I existed, pretend that everything was fine. Instead, I walked. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just needed to move, needed to feel something other than the hollow numbness spreading through my chest. My feet carried me past the tavern, past the rows of small houses where pack families lived in warmth and safety, past the boundary markers that separated Thornridge's territory from the wildlands beyond. I should turn back. The blizzard was getting worse, and I had no coat, no supplies. But turning back meant facing my father's relief, meant packing that single trunk, meant counting down the hours until I became Lord Blackwood's property. So I kept walking. The forest swallowed me whole. Ancient pines heavy with snow, their branches creaking under the weight. My teeth chattered violently, my fingers had gone numb, but still I walked, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant feeling, and feeling meant acknowledging that my own father had just sold me to save himself. That's when I smelled it. Blood. Fresh blood, hot and copper bright against the clean scent of snow. My feet stopped moving. Every survival instinct I possessed screamed at me to turn around, to run back to the pack, to let whatever was bleeding out there die in peace. But something else, something deeper and more fundamental pulled me forward. I found him in a small clearing. A massive gray wolf collapsed in the snow. He was dying. I could see it in the way his breathing came in, shallow rattling gasps in the dark blood pooling beneath his body, steaming in the frigid air in the arrows. 3 of them buried deep in his flank and shoulder. Hunters, illegal hunters, the kind who poached shifters for their pelts and asked questions later. The wolf's eye cracked open as I approached, golden and fierce even in the face of death. He tried to snarl, tried to warn me away, but the sound that emerged was weak and broken. It's okay, I heard myself whisper. I'm not going to hurt you. I should leave him, should let nature take its course. 1 less shifter in the world wouldn't change anything, and trying to save him would probably get me killed. But I was so tired of being worthless, so tired of being the kind of person who could be discarded without consequence. And maybe if I could save this one creature, if I could prove that my existence had value even without a wolf form, even without the ability to shift, maybe that would mean something. Maybe that would mean I wasn't completely useless. I stripped off my apron and pressed it against his worst wound, trying to staunch the bleeding. The wolf's eye fixed on me with something that looked almost like confusion, like he couldn't understand why a wolfless Omega would try to save him. I couldn't understand it either. I'm going to get you somewhere warm, I told him, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm going to save you, even if it killed me, even if no one ever knew, even if it changed nothing about the fate waiting for me in 3 days. I would save him, because I needed to prove to myself, to the moon goddess, to the universe that had made me broken, that I was worth more than the signature on Collector Voss's contract. I was worth at least this much. Chapter 2. The Weight of Worth. The wolf was dying faster than I could think. I knelt in the snow beside him, my apron already soaked through with blood that steamed in the frigid air, and tried to remember everything I'd ever learned about field medicine, which wasn't much. Pack healers didn't waste time training omegas who couldn't shift. Why bother teaching someone who'd never hunt, never fight, never be worth the resources it took to save them? But I'd watched. I'd always watched, hungry for any scrap of knowledge that might make me useful. Okay, I breathed, my hands shaking as I examined the arrows. Okay, think, Dorothy. 3 arrows, 1 in his shoulder, 2 in his flank. The shoulder wound was the worst I could see it with every labored breath he took, the way the arrow shifted slightly, grinding against bone. If I pulled them out, he'd bleed faster. If I left them in, they'd kill him slowly as infection set in. The wolf's golden eye tracked my movements with an intelligence that made my chest tight. He knew he was dying. I could see the resignation there, the way prey animals looked when they'd given up fighting. Except he wasn't prey. Even bleeding out in the snow, he radiated a kind of power that made my omega instincts scream warnings I didn't understand. This wasn't just any wolf. This was someone important. And I was just a girl who couldn't shift, trying to save him with nothing but stubbornness and a bloody apron. I need to move you, I told him, like he could understand. Maybe he could. Shifters in wolf form retained their human consciousness, or so I'd been told. I'd never experienced it myself. Never would. There's a barn. My father's barn about 10 miles south. If I can get you there, I can. I can what? Play healer with supplies I didn't have. Pray to a moon goddess who'd already made it clear she had no interest in helping me. The wolf made a sound. Not quite a whimper, but close. His eye closed, and for a terrible moment, I thought I'd lost him. Then his chest rose again, shallow and rattling, and relief flooded through me so intensely it felt like pain. "Stay with me," I whispered. "Please, just stay." I'd never begged the universe for anything before. What was the point? The universe had made its position on Dorothy Thorne abundantly clear, but I begged now with my hands pressed against his blood-soaked fur and the blizzard howling around us like the world itself was trying to erase this moment. 10 meters in a blizzard, carrying a wolf that had to weigh at least 200 pounds. Impossible. I'd signed a contract less than an hour ago that would send me to the capital in 3 days. I'd accepted that my life was over, that I'd become property, that nothing I did would ever matter. Walking back to that barn, to that father who'd sold me, to that future I couldn't escape, that was the reasonable choice. But I'd spent my entire life being reasonable, being small, being the kind of daughter who accepted her worthlessness without complaint, and I was so tired of it. "We're not dying tonight," I told the wolf, my voice hard with a determination I didn't know I possessed. "Neither of us. Do you hear me?" I stood on numb legs and assessed the situation with the cold clarity that came from having nothing left to lose. The wolf was massive, yes, but he was also barely conscious, which meant he wouldn't fight me. And I was an omega, physically weaker than any shifter, but still stronger than a human, still capable of carrying things that should break me. I'd been carrying the weight of my family's shame for 23 years. What was 200 pounds of dying wolf compared to that? I grabbed him under his front legs, my muscles screaming in protest as I dragged him onto a flat piece of deadfall I'd spotted nearby. Not a proper sled, but it would do. I used my belt to secure him as best I could, then tore strips from my dress to fashion a crude harness. The wolf watched me work with that golden eye, and I swore I saw something like wonder there, or maybe disbelief. Who was this wolfless girl? And why was she trying so hard to save him? I didn't have an answer. I just knew that if I let him die, if I walked away and left him bleeding in the snow, then Collector Voss's contract would become the truth of who I was. A girl worth exactly 3,000 silver marks. A girl whose life had value only in how she could serve others. But if I saved him, If I dragged this dying wolf 10 miles through a blizzard and kept him alive through sheer, stubborn refusal to let him go, then maybe I'd be something else, something more. Even if no one ever knew, even if it killed me trying, I picked up the makeshift harness and started pulling. The first mile was agony. My muscles, unused to this kind of strain, protested with every step. The snow came down so thick I could barely see 3 feet ahead. The wind cut through my ruined dress like it wasn't even there, and I'd lost feeling in my hands within the first 10 minutes. But I kept moving. The wolf's weight dragged at me like an anchor, like the physical manifestation of every burden I'd ever carried. My father's disappointment, the pack's disgust, the healer's pronouncement of my infertility, delivered with the clinical detachment of someone cataloging a defective product. The mate who'd rejected me the moment the bond snapped into place, his face twisting with revulsion at the realization that the moon goddess had tied him to something broken. "You're worthless," the wind seemed to whisper. "Give up. Let him die. Save yourself." I gritted my teeth and pulled harder. The second mile, I started talking. "My mother used to tell me stories," I said through chattering teeth, my voice barely audible over the storm. "Before she died, about the moon goddess, and how she blessed the first shifters with her power, how we were supposed to be her children, her gift to the world." The wolf's eye cracked open slightly. "Still alive, still with me," she said. "The goddess gave us the ability to shift, so we'd never be helpless, so we'd always have strength when we needed it." I laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. Guess she forgot about me. Or maybe I'm not actually her child. Maybe I'm just a mistake. My foot caught on something buried in the snow, and I went down hard, landing on my knees with enough force to make my teeth clack together. Pain shot up my legs, bright and clarifying. For a moment, I just knelt there in the snow, the harness still gripped in my frozen hands, and thought about how easy it would be to just stay down. Behind me, the wolf made a sound, low and rough and somehow encouraging. "I'm okay," I told him, pushing myself back to my feet. "I'm okay. We're going to make it." The third mile, I ran out of feeling in my legs. They moved beneath me like they belonged to someone else, mechanical and distant. My dress had frozen to my skin. The wet fabric turned to ice. I couldn't feel my face anymore, couldn't feel my hands where they gripped the harness, but I could feel my heartbeat, could feel my lungs burning with each breath, could feel that stubborn, furious determination that had kept me alive through 23 years of being unwanted. I thought about Lord Blackwood's estate, about the personal household collector Voss had described with his cold, clinical voice, about the 5-year contract that would make me property, would strip away even the illusion of autonomy I'd clung to in Thorn Ridge. 3 days I had 3 days before that life began. But tonight, I was going to save this wolf. Tonight, I was going to prove that Dorothy Thorne, the worthless Omega who couldn't shift, was capable of something extraordinary, even if it was the last extraordinary thing I ever did. The 4th mile, I started to hallucinate. I saw my mother, her gentle face smiling at me through the snow. She'd been beautiful once before. The wasting sickness had hollowed her out. Before my father had started drinking to forget he'd lost his mate, and been left with a daughter who'd never be able to replace her. "You're stronger than you know," my mother whispered. And I knew it was just delirium, just my dying brain trying to comfort itself. But I clung to the words anyway. "You've always been stronger." The 5th mile, I fell again and again and again. Each time I got back up. Each time I checked to make sure the wolf was still breathing. Each time I pulled that harness tighter and kept moving, the 6th mile. I couldn't remember why I was doing this anymore. Couldn't remember where I was going. There was only the next step and the next and the next. The wolf's weight behind me, the storm around me, the stubborn animal refusal to stop. The 7th mile. I started singing an old lullaby my mother had taught me about the moon goddess and her children. My voice was hoarse and cracked, barely audible over the wind. But I sang it anyway, over and over the same verses because I couldn't remember any others. Behind me, the wolf's breathing seemed to steady slightly. Or maybe I imagined it. Maybe I was just going mad from cold and exhaustion and the certainty that I was going to die out here in the snow. My body found in spring by hunters who'd wonder what kind of fool Omega had tried to save a dying wolf. The 8th mile. I saw lights distant and flickering, barely visible through the storm. But there, the barn, my father's barn, where I'd spent countless hours as a child, hiding from the other pack children who'd mocked my inability to shift, where I'd taught myself to read using books salvaged from the pack's meager library, where I'd dreamed of being someone else, somewhere else, someone worthy of the space she took up in the world. Fresh strength surged through me, or maybe it was just desperation, the knowledge that if I stopped now, we'd both die within sight of safety. I pulled. The 9th mile felt like dying. My vision had narrowed to a tunnel, dark at the edges and closing in. Each breath felt like inhaling knives. My heart beat erratically in my chest, too fast and then too slow, struggling to keep me conscious. I couldn't feel anything anymore. Not the cold, not the pain, not even the harness cutting into my shoulders. But I could see those lights getting closer, growing brighter, just a little farther, just a little more. The 10th mile. I fell and couldn't get up. My legs simply stopped working. One moment I was moving forward, and the next I was face down in the snow. The harness still gripped in my frozen hands. I tried to push myself up, but my arms wouldn't support my weight. Tried to command my legs to move, but they ignored me. This was it then. I'd gotten so close, could see the barn maybe a quarter mile away, its familiar shape outlined against the darkness. But close wasn't good enough. Close didn't save the wolf. Close didn't prove I was worth more than 3,000 silver marks. Behind me, I heard the wolf move, heard him shift his weight on the makeshift sled, and I wanted to tell him to stay still, to conserve his strength, but I couldn't make my mouth form words. Then, impossibly, I felt warmth. The wolf had dragged himself off the sled, arrows still embedded in his flesh, and pressed his body against mine. His one good front leg hooked around my shoulder, and he pulled, not leading me, supporting me, sharing what little strength he had left. Together, we stood together. We moved forward. I don't remember the last quarter mile. Don't remember reaching the barn or fumbling with the door, or finally collapsing onto the hay-strewn floor with the wolf beside me. Don't remember anything except the overwhelming relief of stopping, of surviving, of saving him. The barn was marginally warmer than outside, sheltered from the worst of the wind. I lay there for a long moment, my body refusing to move, and listened to the wolf's breathing. Still shallow, still labored, but alive. We were alive. We made it. I whispered into the darkness. 10 miles. We actually made it. The wolf's golden eye fixed on me, and in its depths, I saw something that made my breath catch. Not gratitude, not relief, recognition, like he'd seen something in me during that brutal journey, something worth remembering. Then his eye closed, and consciousness left him entirely. I forced myself to move. Forced my frozen, battered body to crawl to where my father kept his medical supplies, meager though they were. Found clean cloth, a bottle of whiskey for sterilization, needle and thread. Found a lantern, and lit it with shaking hands that could barely grip the flint. The arrows had to come out. I'd carried him 10 meters. I'd saved his life once already. Now I had to do it again. I positioned myself beside his worst wound, the one in his shoulder, and gripped the arrow shaft with both hands, took a deep breath, thought about Collector Voss's contract, about Lord Blackwood's estate, about the life that waited for me in 3 days, where nothing I did would ever matter. This is going to hurt, I told the unconscious wolf. I'm sorry, I pulled. Chapter 3. The King in the Barn. The arrow came out with a wet, grinding sound that would haunt my nightmares. Blood followed hot and thick, steaming in the cold barn air. Too much blood. I pressed my makeshift bandages against the wound with hands that had gone beyond shaking into a steady mechanical numbness. My brain had disconnected from my body somewhere around mile 7, and now I moved on pure instinct, on muscle memory from years of watching the pack healer work on injured hunters. The wolf didn't wake, didn't even flinch. Either he was too far gone to feel pain anymore, or his body had finally surrendered to unconsciousness as a mercy. I hoped it was the latter. "One down," I whispered, my voice raw from screaming into the blizzard for 10 meters. 2 more. The arrows in his flank were deeper, angled in a way that suggested the hunters had been shooting from above, probably perched in trees, waiting for prey to pass beneath. They'd gotten lucky with this wolf, or he'd gotten unlucky. 3 clean shots before he'd managed to escape. Most shifters would have died within minutes of wounds like these. The fact that he'd survived this long spoke to either incredible strength or sheer stubbornness. I understood stubbornness. I gripped the second arrow and pulled. This one came easier, the angle cleaner. More blood, but I was ready for it this time, already pressing cloth against the wound before the worst of it could spill. My hands worked with practice efficiency, cleaning, applying pressure, stitching with thread that was probably meant for mending saddles, but would have to do. The pack healer had once told me I had steady hands. "Shame you can't shift," she'd said, not unkindly. "You might have made a decent healer yourself. Just another thing my broken body had stolen from me. Another future that existed only in the realm of what if." The third arrow was the worst. It had lodged between his ribs, close to his lung. I could see the shaft moving slightly with each breath he took, and terror seized my chest. If I pulled wrong, if I tore something vital, if I caused more damage than the arrow itself. "Don't think," I told myself firmly. "Just do it." I positioned my hands, said a prayer to the moon goddess, who'd never answered me before, and pulled. The wolf's body convulsed. His eyes snapped open, wild and gold and full of pain so intense it was almost visible. A sound tore from his throat. Not quite a howl, not quite a scream. Something caught between wolf and human in agony. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry," I chanted, pressing down on the wound even as he thrashed weakly beneath my hands. "I know it hurts. I know. I'm almost done. Please, please, just hold on." His eye found mine. For one eternal moment, we stared at each other. Predator and prey, shifter and omega, dying wolf and the girl too stubborn to let him die. Something passed between us in that moment. Something I couldn't name but felt in the marrow of my bones. Then his eye rolled back and he went still. My heart stopped. No, 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 no. I pressed my ear to his chest, listening desperately for a heartbeat. For several agonizing seconds, I heard nothing. Nothing but the wind howling outside and my own pulse thundering in my ears and the awful pressing silence of death. Then thump, faint, irregular. "But there, you stubborn bastard." I breathed relief, making me dizzy. "You're not allowed to die." "Not after I carried you 10 miles. That's not how this works." I finished stitching the wound with hands that shook so badly I had to restart twice. Then I cleaned the other 2 injuries again, checking for signs of infection, applying a pus made from herbs I found in my father's supplies. Yarrow for bleeding, comfrey for healing, garlic for infection. Please let it be enough. Please let him live. By the time I finished, dawn was breaking outside. Gray light filtered through the barn's gaps, and I could see the wolf properly for the first time. He was massive, easily the largest wolf I'd ever seen. His fur was a deep gray, almost silver in places, with darker guard hairs along his spine, even unconscious and wounded. He radiated power. This wasn't just any wolf. This was an alpha. Maybe even the barn door opened. I spun around, my body instinctively placing itself between the wolf and the intruder. My father stood in the doorway, his face haggard from a night of drinking, his eyes widening as he took in the scene. Me covered in blood and half frozen. The enormous wolf lying on his barn floor. The 3 bloody arrows I'd left in a pile. "Dorothy." His voice was carefully flat. "What have you done?" I saved him. My chin lifted, defiant. He was dying. I couldn't just leave him. My father moved closer, and I saw his nostrils flare as he scented the wolf. His face went pale, then gray, then a sickly shade of green I'd never seen before. Moon goddess, he breathed. Dorothy, do you have any idea? He stopped, swallowing hard. That's not just any wolf. I know. He's an alpha. I think he's the alpha. My father's voice shook. That's King Davian Silver, Alpha King of all the Northern Territories. The world tilted sideways. The Alpha King, the most powerful shifter in the entire realm. The wolf who commanded armies. Who'd unified the fractured packs under a single rule. Who was said to be so strong he could kill a bear in single combat. The wolf whose word was law. Whose justice was swift and absolute. Whose temper was legendary. And I dragged him 10 miles through a blizzard like he was a stray dog. He's going to kill us, my father said, the words coming out flat and resigned. When he wakes up and realizes what happened where he is, humans aren't allowed to see shifters in wolf form without permission. It's law. And you didn't just see him. You touched him. You his eyes fixed on the bloody stitches. You operated on him. On the king he was dying. I said again, my voice smaller now. What was I supposed to do? Let him die. My father's control snapped. He's the king, Dorothy. He has healers, guards, an entire pack searching for him right now. You think they won't find him here? You think they won't punish whoever kept him? I saved his life. You doomed ours. He scrubbed his hands over his face. When the king's guard arrives, and they will arrive, they're going to execute us for daring to touch royalty. That's if we're lucky. If we're unlucky, a low growl cut through his words. We both froze. The wolf, the king, had woken. His golden eyes were open and alert now, fixed on my father with an intensity that made every hair on my body stand on end. He couldn't stand, couldn't move without tearing his stitches, but he didn't need to. The threat in that growl was clear. Back away from her. My father stumbled backward, his face going white. His Omega instincts recognized the command for what it was. Even without words, he fled the barn without another word, leaving me alone with the most powerful shifter in the Northern Territories. I should have been terrified, should have run after my father, should have begged forgiveness, should have done any of 1,000 things that might have saved me from the consequences of my impulsive rescue. Instead, I knelt down beside the wolf and checked his stitches. You tore one, I said quietly, finding fresh blood seeping through the bandage on his shoulder. Stop moving. You're going to hurt yourself. The king's golden eyes fixed on me, with an expression I couldn't read. Confusion, maybe, or disbelief, like he couldn't quite process why this wolfless Omega was scolding him, instead of cowering. I met his gaze steadily. I'd already signed my life away to Collector Voss, already accepted that my future was pain and servitude and slow death in Lord Blackwood's household. What more could the king do to me that fate hadn't already decreed? I'm going to restitch this, I told him, reaching for my needle and thread. It's going to hurt. If you need to bite something, bite the hay, not me. For a long moment, the king just stared at me. Then, impossibly, he huffed. It sounded almost like amusement. I worked in silence, my hands steady despite everything, despite the fear coiling in my gut, despite the knowledge that I just reprimanded royalty like he was a misbehaving pup, despite the way his eyes tracked my every movement with that unnerving golden intensity. When I finished, I sat back on my heels and really looked at him. You're going to live, I said. The wounds are clean, no major vessels severed. If infection doesn't set in, you should be able to shift and heal properly within a few days. I paused. Your guards will probably find you before then. My father will tell the pack elders what happened, and they'll send word to the capital. You'll be home soon. The king made a sound, soft and low. His eyes hadn't left my face. I'm sorry, I added quietly, for touching you without permission, for seeing you in wolf form, for not letting you die with dignity like I probably should have. I smiled bitterly. Seems I'm good at making the wrong choices. I stood to leave, to give him privacy, to put distance between myself and the massive mistake I'd made. But before I could take a step, the king moved, despite his injuries, despite the pain it must have caused. He reached out and hooked his claws gently, so gently around the hem of my destroyed dress. Stay. The command was clear, even without words. And something in his eyes, something that looked almost like desperation, made it impossible to disobey. So I stayed. I settled down in the hay beside him, careful not to jar his injuries. The king watched me for a moment longer, then deliberately rested his massive head on my lap. The gesture was so unexpected, so vulnerable, that it stole my breath. "You're delirious," I told him, even as my hand moved instinctively to stroke the soft fur between his ears. "The blood loss is making you confused. You don't want an Omega touching you. You'll regret this when you're thinking clearly." But he didn't pull away. If anything, he pressed closer, his eyes finally sliding shut with something that looked like relief. I sat there in the gray dawn light, covered in blood and half frozen, with the Alpha King's head in my lap, and tried to understand what was happening. Tried to reconcile the wolf who'd threatened my father with the one currently seeking comfort from my touch. Tried to figure out how I'd gone from signing a contract of servitude to this, whatever this was. "I'm Dorothy," I whispered, even though he probably already knew, probably had known the moment he'd scented me. "Dorothy Thorne. I'm nobody, an Omega who can't shift. In 3 days, I leave for the capital. I've been sold to Lord Blackwood's household to clear my father's debts." The king's eyes opened at that. Something flickered in their golden depths. Anger, recognition. I couldn't tell. "So this," I continued, my hand still stroking his fur. "Whatever kindness you think you owe me for saving your life, you don't. You don't owe me anything. In 3 days, I'll be gone, and you'll forget the wolfless Omega who was stupid enough to drag you through a blizzard. That's how this story ends." The king made a sound, low and rumbling, and somehow negative, like he was disagreeing. But what else could he do? He was king. I was property. The distance between us was more than just social. It was cosmic, unbridgeable. Outside, I heard voices, the pack elders probably roused by my father, come to see if it was true. If the king was really here, if they needed to start preparing for the royal guard's arrival and the executions that would surely follow. "They're coming," I said softly. "You'll be taken care of properly now. Real healers, real medicine, everything a king deserves." I moved to stand to remove myself before the elders arrived and saw me touching him, but the king's paw pressed down on my lap, gentle but firm. "Stay. I can't," I whispered. "You're the king. I'm nobody. This, whatever this is, it isn't real. It's just gratitude. It's just the bond that forms between someone who saves a life and the life they saved. It doesn't mean anything." The king's eyes met mine, and in them I saw something that made my breath catch, something that looked almost like hurt, like my words had wounded him more deeply than the arrows ever could. Then the barn door burst open, and the moment shattered. 6-pack elders flooded in, their eyes widening in horror and shock as they took in the scene. The king, the way his head rested in my lap like I had any right to touch him. "Your Majesty," the head elder breathed, dropping to one knee. The others followed suit, forming a semicircle of bowed heads and terrified respect. The king didn't acknowledge them. His eyes stayed fixed on mine, and in that moment, I understood. He wasn't ready to let me go. I wasn't sure I was ready to be let go. But in 3 days, Collector Voss would come, and I would leave. And this strange, impossible moment would become nothing more than a story I'd tell myself in the dark hours of Lord Blackwood's household, a reminder that once briefly I'd been worth something, even if it was only to a king too delirious from blood loss to know better. Chapter 4. The Price of Mercy. The pack elders didn't know what to do with me. I could see it in their faces as they huddled in the corner of the barn, casting nervous glances between the king and me. Protocol demanded they remove me immediately, and Omega had no business being in the presence of royalty, especially not touching him with such casual intimacy, but the king's paw still rested on my lap, and every time one of the elders took a step forward, a low growl would rumble from his chest. "Mine," that growl said. don't touch what's mine. Except I wasn't his. I was Lord Blackwood's. As of 3 days from now, I was my father's to sell, the pack's to discard, the universe's cosmic mistake. I wasn't anyone's to keep. Your Majesty had Elder Frost tried again, his voice careful and respectful. We've sent word to the capital. Your guard should arrive by midday. In the meantime, we have healers who can tend to your wounds properly, if you'll allow us to. Another growl, deeper this time. The king's eyes never left my face. Elder Frost's jaw tightened with frustration. He was a good man, generally speaking, one of the few in Thornage who'd never openly mocked my inability to shift. But even his patience had limits, and those limits were being tested by a king who refused to follow basic social protocol. The girl needs rest, he said finally, trying a different angle. She's been out in the blizzard all night. She's half frozen and covered in blood. Let us take her somewhere warm, get her cleaned up. No, the word hung in the air like thunder. Everyone froze. The king had shifted. Not fully. He was still mostly wolf, still too injured for a complete transformation, but his head had changed, becoming something caught between beast and man. His muzzle had shortened. His skull had broadened, and when he spoke again, the words came out in a voice that was rough and deep and unmistakably human. She stays. I stared at him in shock. Partial shifts were difficult even for experienced alphas, requiring enormous control and energy. For someone who'd been dying hours ago, who'd lost so much blood, who was running on nothing but stubborn will, it should have been impossible. But then he was the Alpha King. Impossible was probably just another word for Tuesday. Your Majesty, Elder Frost said carefully, the girl is bound for the capital in 3 days. She's been contracted to Lord Blackwood's household. We cannot interfere with Blackwood. The king's voice went cold. Dangerous. His golden eyes finally left my face to fix on the elder. Silas Blackwood. Yes, Your Majesty. Her father owed a debt to the crown. The girl was offered in service to clear. No, that single word carried such weight, such absolute authority that Elder Frost actually took a step back. The contract is void, the king continued. Each word deliberate. Whatever debt Roland Thorne owes, I'm claiming it. The girl belongs to me now. The world tilted again, belonged to him. Like I was property changing hands. Like the contract with Lord Blackwood had simply been replaced with a different master, a different form of servitude. I should have been angry, should have protested, should have demanded some say in my own fate. But all I could think was, at least it's him. At least it was the wolf I'd saved, the king whose head still rested in my lap, whose eyes held something that looked almost like tenderness, protection. I didn't have a name for it, but it felt nothing like the cold clinical transaction collector Voss had described. Your Majesty, Elder Frost said, his voice strained. With respect, you cannot simply claim someone contracted to another. I am the king. The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of absolute power. I can do whatever I want. The girl saved my life. That creates a debt far greater than any her father owes. She's under my protection now. Anyone who tries to touch her, take her, or harm her will answer to me personally. The threat hung in the air, crystal clear. Elder Frost bowed his head in defeat. As you command, Your Majesty, the king's eyes returned to my face. In them, I saw a question he couldn't ask with the elders present. Is this what you want? I didn't know. I didn't know anything anymore, except that the future I'd accepted Lord Blackwood's household. 5 years of being used and discarded had just been replaced with something else, something unknown, potentially just as dangerous, but somehow different. Thank you, I whispered, the words inadequate for the enormity of what he'd just done. The king's expression softened. His partially shifted head leaned heavier into my lap, and I realized with a start that the transformation had cost him. He was trembling slightly, his breathing more labored than before. You're hurting yourself, I said quietly, my healer's instincts overriding everything else. The shift is putting too much strain on your wounds. You need to protect you. Worth it, he murmured. His eyes were starting to glaze slightly. exhaustion and blood loss finally catching up with him. Needed to protect you. My throat tightened. When was the last time anyone had protected me? When had I ever been worth protecting? Sleep, I told him, my hand returning to stroke his fur. I'll be here when you wake up, I promise. The king's eyes held mine for a moment longer, searching for something. Then, seemingly satisfied, he let them drift closed. Within moments, his breathing had evened out into the deep rhythm of sleep. I sat there with the Alpha King's head in my lap and tried to process what had just happened. He'd claimed me, voided my contract, made me his what? Property, servant. The word he'd used was mine. But what did that mean in practical terms? Was I just trading one master for another? Or was this something else entirely? And why? Why had he done it? Gratitude alone didn't explain the fierceness in his eyes, the absolute authority in his voice. He was the king. He could have rewarded me with gold, with land, with any number of things that didn't require personally claiming a wolfless Omega. Unless, no. I shut down that thought before it could fully form. The king didn't want me in any meaningful sense. He was just protecting someone who'd saved his life. This was about honor, about repaying a debt. Nothing more. It couldn't be anything more. Girl. Elder Frost's voice was quiet, pitched so only I could hear. He'd approached while I was lost in thought, and now he knelt beside me with an expression that was almost sympathetic. Do you understand what just happened? The king claimed me, I said flatly. I'm his now instead of Lord Blackwood's. It's more complicated than that. Elder Frost glanced at the sleeping king, then back at me. When an alpha claims someone, especially with that kind of intensity, it's not just about ownership. It's about protection, about territory. He's essentially declared you part of his pack. Under his personal safeguarding, I can't join a pack, I said bitterly. I can't shift. I'll never be able to run with them, hunt with them, be one of them. The king doesn't understand what he's claiming. Maybe Elder Frost's eyes were thoughtful. Or maybe he understands better than you think. King Davian isn't known for making impulsive decisions. If he claimed you, he had a reason, and you'd be wise to figure out what that reason is before his guard arrives and takes you to the capital where the king lived, where I would now apparently be going, not as Lord Blackwood's property, but as what? The king's ward, his servant, his charity case. What happens now? I asked quietly. Now. Elder Frost stood, his knees cracking slightly. Now you stay with him until his guard arrives. Keep him comfortable. Make sure his wounds don't reopen. And Dorothy. He paused, his expression serious. Whatever you did last night carrying him through that blizzard, saving his life, you've caught the attention of the most powerful shifter in the realm. That can be a blessing or a curse, depending on how you handle it. Be careful. He left before I could ask what he meant by that. The other elders filtered out after him until it was just me and the sleeping king, and the gray morning light filtering through the barn's cracks. Outside, I could hear the pack stirring whispers and gasps as words spread about who was here, about what had happened, about the wolfless Omega who'd somehow saved the king's life. I'd spent my entire life being invisible, being nothing. Now, suddenly, I was the center of attention, and I had no idea what to do with it. The king's guard arrived at noon, just as Elder Frost had predicted. I heard them before I saw them, the thunder of hooves, the jingle of armor, the disciplined shouts of soldiers, used to moving as a single unit. Then the barn door burst open, and 12 guards in silver and black armor flooded in, their hands on their weapons until they spotted their king. The lead guard, a tall, scarred woman with iron-gray hair, stopped dead. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene. The king, still in partial wolf form, his head in my lap, me covered in dried blood and hay, my hand resting protectively on his fur. "What?" she started. "Captain Thessa." The king's eyes opened, his voice still that rough partial shift growl. "Stand down. The girl is mine. Anyone who threatens her answers to me." Captain Thessa's jaw clenched, but she immediately dropped to one knee. The other guards followed suit. "Your Majesty, We've been searching for you since the attack yesterday. When you didn't return, I was ambushed. Hunters, 3 arrows." The king's words were clipped, efficient. The girl found me dying in the snow. She carried me 10 meters through the blizzard and saved my life. She's under my protection now. Is that understood? "Yes, Your Majesty." Captain Thessa's eyes flicked to me, and I saw calculation there. Assessment. She was trying to figure out what I was, what I meant to the king, what threat or advantage I might represent. "We have a healer with us, if you'll allow." "The girl stays," the king said firmly. "She doesn't leave my sight until we reach the capital. After that, she'll be housed in the palace, under my direct protection. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally." The casual way he was upending protocol, the absolute authority in his voice. It should have been terrifying. Maybe it was. But there was also something almost comforting about it. About having someone powerful enough to protect me. Someone who seemed determined to do so regardless of what anyone else thought, even if I didn't understand why. Captain Thessa's eyes narrowed slightly, but she simply nodded. "As you command, Your Majesty. We'll prepare for transport. The healers will stabilize you for the journey, and we should be able to reach the capital by nightfall if we leave within the hour." The capital, the palace, a world so far removed from Thornage that it might as well be another realm entirely. I was really leaving, not to Lord Blackwood's household, but to something else, something unknown. "Dorothy." The king's voice pulled me from my spiraling thoughts. He was looking at me with those intense golden eyes, and I saw concern there. "Are you afraid?" Was I? I searched my feelings, trying to untangle the mess of emotions churning in my chest. Fear, yes, but also relief. Hope, confusion, gratitude. A strange fluttering sensation I didn't have a name for. "I don't know," I admitted quietly. "I don't know what I am anymore." The king's expression softened. "You're safe. That's all you need to know right now. You're safe and you're mine, and no one will hurt you, I promise." His promise. Like the answer to the riddle I'd never asked him. Like the answer to questions I didn't know how to form. "Why?" The word escaped before I could stop it. "Why are you doing this? You're the king. You could reward me in 1,000 different ways that don't require claiming me. Why this?" The king was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was so soft I almost missed it. "Because when I was dying in that snow, alone and in agony, you chose to save me. Not because I was the king. You didn't even know who I was. You saved me because you saw something worth saving. Because you have a heart that refuses to let things die. Even when letting them die would be easier. Even when saving them might destroy you." He paused, his eyes never leaving mine. "No one has ever looked at me like that, like I was worth more than my crown, like I was just a life, a creature deserving of mercy." His voice roughened with emotion. "You gave me something I didn't know I was missing, and I'm not letting you go. Not to Blackwood, not to anyone. You're mine now, Dorothy Thorne, and I protect what's mine." My breath caught. There was something in his eyes, something raw and vulnerable and almost desperate. This wasn't just about gratitude. This was about something deeper, something that scared me because I didn't understand it, something that scared me because maybe secretly I wanted it. "Okay," I whispered, because what else could I say? What other choice did I have, except to trust this wolf who'd chosen me when no one else ever had? The king's eyes closed briefly, and I saw relief wash over his features. "Okay," he echoed. Captain Thessa cleared her throat. "Your Majesty, the healers are ready. We need to move you to the cart for transport. It will be more comfortable then." "I'll walk," the king said firmly. "Your Majesty, you have 3 arrow wounds and you've lost a significant amount of blood. You need I'll walk." The king's tone left no room for argument. "I'm not being carted into my own capital like an invalid. I entered these lands on 4 legs. I'll leave them the same way." It was about pride. I realized about not showing weakness. Even wounded, even having been saved by an Omega, he needed to maintain the image of strength that being king required. I understood that. Understood the need to protect yourself with armor, even when the armor was made of pride and stubbornness. Then at least let the healers tend your wounds properly before we leave, Captain Thessa said, her tone suggesting this was the most compromise she'd get. The king glanced at me, and I saw the question there. Will you stay? I'll stay, I told him. Until we reach the capital, I promised. Remember? Something in his expression eased. I remember. The healers came, then two older women, with the confident bearing of people who'd seen everything, and were impressed by nothing. They examined the king's wounds with professional detachment, their eyebrows rising when they saw my stitching. This is good work, one of them said, surprised. Clean stitches, proper angle, minimal scarring. Who did this? I did, I said quietly. Both healers turned to stare at me, then at my omega scent, then back at the stitches. You're not trained. The second healer said it wasn't a question. No, I just watched and remembered. The first healer made a thoughtful sound. Well, you have steady hands and good instincts. The king is lucky you found him. It was possibly the first genuine compliment I'd received in years. Something warm unfurled in my chest, small and fragile. But there, maybe I wasn't completely worthless after all. The healers worked quickly, applying salves and fresh bandages, giving the king something for the pain that he refused to take, until Captain Thessa literally ordered him to. Then they helped him to his feet, all four of them, and I watched in awe as he stood, massive and powerful, even wounded, every inch the Alpha King. He turned his golden eyes to me. Come. I fell into step beside him as the guards formed up around us, creating a protective formation with the king at the center, me at his side, like I belonged there, like I was worth protecting. We left Thorn Ridge as the sun reached its zenith, the king walking on four legs despite his wounds, his head held high with regal dignity. I walked beside him in my blood-stained dress, barefoot in the snow, and tried not to think about my father watching from his window, tried not to think about the future waiting for me in the capital, tried not to think about the way the king kept glancing at me, like he needed to confirm I was still there, like he was afraid I might disappear. Behind us, Thorn Ridge grew smaller, the only home I'd ever known fading into the distance, and ahead was the unknown, the capital, the palace, a life I couldn't imagine, with a king I didn't understand, in a world that had never had a place for someone like me. But as the king pressed closer to my side, his warmth bleeding into me through his fur, I thought, maybe that world could make a place. Maybe I was finally worth the space I took up. Maybe this was the beginning of something I'd spent my entire life not daring to hope for. Or maybe I was just fooling myself, and 3 days from now, I'd wake up and realize this was all just another kind of cage. Time would tell. Chapter 5. The capital was beautiful in the way poisonous things often are. We arrived as twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, and my first glimpse of the city took my breath away. Thorn Ridge was a collection of wooden buildings clustered around a single dirt road. Practical, humble, built for survival rather than beauty. But the capital was something else entirely. White stone buildings rose 3 and 4 stories high, their walls carved with intricate designs that caught the fading light. Cobblestone streets wound between them like rivers, clean and well-maintained. Shops with glass windows displayed goods I'd never seen before. Silk dresses, jeweled weapons, books with leather bindings that probably cost more than my father's entire debt. And everywhere shifters moved with casual confidence, their expensive clothes and proud bearing, marking them as people who'd never known what it meant to be unwanted. At the city's heart, rising above everything else like a statement of absolute power, stood the palace. It was massive, impossibly massive. White marble walls gleamed in the dying light, punctuated by towers that seemed to pierce the sky itself. Gardens spread around it in precise geometric patterns. Even in winter, maintaining a stark Asta beauty, and surrounding everything, a wall at least 20 feet high, patrolled by guards in the king's silver and black. This was where I would live now, in that palace, under the protection of a king I'd known for less than a day. The absurdity of it made me want to laugh or cry. I wasn't sure which. Impressive, isn't it? Captain Thessa had dropped back to walk beside me. The king was several paces ahead, flanked by his guards, his posture still regal despite the wounds I knew must be causing him agony. Most people have that expression their first time seeing it. Like they can't quite believe it's real. It doesn't look real, I admitted quietly. It looks like something from the stories my mother used to tell me. Like a fairy tale. Fairy tales usually have happier endings than real life, Captain Thessa said, her tone dry. Then she glanced at me, her expression assessing. The king has never brought anyone back with him before, never claimed anyone. In 15 years of service, I've never seen him show that kind of interest in another person. Quote, interest. The word made something flutter in my chest, something dangerous and foolish. He's just repaying a debt, I said firmly. I saved his life. He's protecting me, that's all. Captain Thessa made a non-committal sound. If you say so. What else could it be? The captain was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was carefully neutral. The king is complicated, powerful, yes, fair, usually, but lonely. Being king means everyone wants something from you. Everyone sees the crown before they see the man. It makes trust nearly impossible. And you think he trusts me? The idea was laughable. He doesn't even know me. He doesn't even know me. He knows you saved his life when you had nothing to gain from it, when you didn't know who he was, when saving him might have killed you. Captain Thessa's eyes were sharp. That kind of selflessness is rare, especially in the capital. Here, everything is a transaction. Everyone has an angle. The king is surrounded by people who would die for him, but only because loyalty to the crown benefits them. I'm not any different, I said. I'm here because he claimed me. Because I have nowhere else to go. Are you? Captain Thessa asked. Because from where I'm standing, you look like someone who'd have stayed with him even if he hadn't claimed you. Even if it meant going to Blackwood's household afterward. You weren't treating the king back there. You were treating a wounded wolf. There's a difference. I didn't have an answer for that because she was right. Even knowing who he was now, even understanding the impossible gulf between us, I couldn't regret saving him, wouldn't regret it. Even if this all turned out to be a mistake, he'd been worth saving. That was all that mattered. We passed through the palace gates as full darkness fell. Guards saluted the king, their faces carefully neutral despite the blood on his fur, and the Omega walking at his side. Servants rushed forward with cloths and water basins, but the king waved them off with a growl that made them scatter like startled birds. He wanted to go inside. Now, without the fuss and ceremony that apparently accompanied his every movement, the palace interior was even more overwhelming than its exterior. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine. Vaulted ceilings painted with scenes of wolves running beneath the moon. Tapestries that probably cost more than entire villages. Everywhere I looked, there was wealth. Casual, careless wealth that reminded me exactly how far I was from Thornage. How far I was from anything I understood. The king led us through corridors that seemed to go on forever, until finally we reached a set of enormous double doors carved with images of wolves. His chambers. I realized the private quarters of the Alpha King. He pushed through the doors, and I followed automatically, then stopped dead. The room beyond was beautiful, in a way that made my chest ache. A massive 4-poster bed dominated one wall, its dark wood frame carved with the same wolf motifs that decorated the doors. Thick carpets covered the floors. A fireplace large enough to roast a whole deer crackled with warmth. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city, offering a view that made me dizzy with vertigo and wonder. But what caught my attention wasn't the luxury. It was the books. Shelves upon shelves of them lining an entire wall. More books than I'd seen in my entire life. Leather-bound, gold-leafed, their spines promising knowledge and stories and worlds I'd never imagined. You like books? The king's voice. Human now. I spun around to find him shifted back to his human form, though he remained partially hunched from his wounds. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell to his shoulders, and those same piercing golden eyes. Handsome in a way that felt almost dangerous, like looking at him too long might burn. He was also completely naked. Heat flooded my face, and I immediately averted my eyes, staring fixedly at the bookshelves instead. Yes. I didn't mean to stare at the books. Or at you. Not that I was staring at you. Dorothy. His voice was amused. Breathe. I sucked in a breath, my heart racing. This was ridiculous. I'd carried this man 10 miles through a blizzard. I'd operated on him, stitched his wounds, held his head in my lap. But seeing him human, naked, in the intimate space of his chambers, it felt different, more real, more dangerous. The books are yours, he said, and I heard fabric rustling as he presumably dressed himself. If you want them, all of them, consider it payment for saving my life. Payment, right? This was a transaction. I needed to remember that. You don't have to pay me, I said quietly, still staring at the books. I didn't save you for a reward. I know. His voice was closer now, just behind me. That's why I want to give you one. Because you didn't ask. Because you expected nothing. Because you saw a dying wolf. And your first instinct was to save him, not to wonder what you'd get out of it. I finally turned to face him. He'd put on loose black pants and a shirt that hung open, revealing bandages wrapped around his torso. His face was drawn with exhaustion and pain, but his eyes were alert, fixed on me with that same unsettling intensity. What am I doing here? I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. Really? Why did you bring me to the palace? Why not just give me gold or land or something normal? Why claim me? The king was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved to the window, his movements careful around his injuries. Come here. I joined him at the window, looking out over the city spread below us. Thousands of lights twinkled in the darkness. Homes, taverns, shops, lives being lived by people who belonged here, who had places and purposes and futures. Do you see all of this? The king asked quietly. This city, this kingdom, every single wolf in it looks at me and sees the crown, sees power, sees someone they need to impress or fear or manipulate. I've been king for 10 years, and in that time, I've had exactly 3 people look at me and see just me. He paused, his jaw tightening. My mother before she died. Captain Thessa, because she's known me since we were children. And you in that barn, covered in my blood, exhausted from carrying me through a blizzard. You looked at me like I was just a wolf who needed saving. Not the king, not someone important, just a life worth preserving. His golden eyes met mine, and I saw vulnerability there that made my breath catch. I brought you here because I'm selfish, he said, simply because I want someone around me who sees me as more than a crown, because you don't want anything from me except for me to survive, and because, he trailed off, his expression conflicted. Because, I prompted my voice barely above a whisper. Because when I woke up in that barn with my head in your lap and you were stroking my fur like I was something precious, something worth caring for, I felt safe for the first time in 10 years. And I'm not ready to give that up. The honesty in his words stole my breath. This wasn't about gratitude or debt or obligation. This was about loneliness, about 2 broken people finding something in each other that eased the ache of being unwanted. I'm not going to be good at this, I warned him. I don't know how to be around royalty. I don't know palace protocol, or proper etiquette, or how to address nobles. I can't shift. I can't fight. I can't do any of the things that would make me useful here. All I can do is be yourself. The king interrupted gently. That's all I'm asking. Just be the person who saved my life, because she couldn't stand to watch something die. The person who spent 10 miles talking to an unconscious wolf like he could hear her. The person who looks at a library and gets that expression like she's seeing something holy. That's not much, I said quietly. It's everything to me. The weight of those words settled between us, heavy with meaning I wasn't ready to examine. Outside, the city glittered like a promise or a threat. I couldn't tell which. I should go, I said, suddenly aware of how intimate this felt. Just the two of us in his chambers, with night pressing against the windows. You need rest and I need stay. That word again, the same one he'd used in the barn when his paw had pressed down on my lap and refused to let me leave. You're Masti, Davian, he corrected softly. When we're alone, I'm just Davian, not the king, not your majesty, just me, like he was asking permission to be human, to be vulnerable, to be something other than the crown he wore. I can't stay in your chambers, I said, trying to be reasonable. Even as part of me wanted to agree, wanted to curl up in that massive bed and feel safe for one night, protected by someone powerful enough to keep the world at bay. People will talk, they'll think. Let them think. Davian's voice was firm. You're under my protection. That means you sleep where I can keep you safe. And right now, that's here. I don't need I do. The words came out quiet, almost vulnerable. I need to know you're safe, that no one can hurt you, that you're not going to disappear in the night and leave me wondering if I imagined you. His fear was so raw, so unexpected, that it disarmed every argument I'd been forming. This wasn't about control or possession. This was about trauma, about a wolf who'd nearly died alone in the snow and woken to find an angel covered in his blood, about someone who'd spent so long being lonely that he'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone care. Okay, I whispered. I'll stay for tonight. Relief flooded Dave's features. Thank you. He showed me to a smaller chamber connected to his, a sitting room that had been converted into a bedroom, complete with a smaller but still luxurious bed, a wardrobe, and a privacy screen close enough that he'd hear if I called, far enough to preserve some semblance of propriety. There are clothes in the wardrobe, he said. They might be too large, but they're clean. And there's a bath through that door if you want to wash. A bath, hot water, the chance to scrub away the dried blood and grime from the longest night of my life. Thank you, I said. Then, because it needed to be said, for everything, for claiming me, for bringing me here, for seeing me. Dave's expression softened. Thank you for saving my life, for carrying me when you had every reason to leave me, for being exactly who you are. He left before I could respond, closing the door softly behind him. I stood alone in the chamber, in a palace in the capital, wearing a blood-stained dress and trying to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Yesterday, I'd been nobody, a wolfless Omega being sold to clear her father's debts. Today, I was under the Alpha King's protection, living in his palace, being thanked for just existing. It didn't feel real. I moved to the bath where servants had already prepared hot water scented with lavender. I stripped off my ruined dress and sank into the warmth, hissing as the heat found every bruise and ache I'd accumulated during the journey. My muscles screamed in protest, remembering the 10 miles of dragging a dying wolf through a blizzard. But I'd done it. I'd saved him. And somehow, in doing so, I'd saved myself. I washed slowly, methodically, scrubbing away the physical evidence of the journey, even as the memory of it burned itself into my mind. The weight of the harness cutting into my shoulders, the endless white of the blizzard, the moment when the king had dragged himself to my side and helped me stand when I couldn't do it alone. We'd saved each other. That's what that moment had been. 2 broken creatures refusing to let go. When I finally emerged from the bath, I found a simple nightgown laid out on the bed, soft, clean, comfortable. I dressed quickly and climbed under the covers, my body crying out for sleep. But sleep didn't come easily. Instead, I lay there in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the palace around me, distant footsteps, murmured voices, the crackle of fire from the king's chamber next door, and underneath it all, barely audible, the sound of someone breathing. Davian, on the other side of the wall, close enough that I could sense him, could feel his presence like a warm weight pressing against my consciousness. He was there, real, alive, because I'd refused to let him die. And I was here, safe, protected by someone who looked at me and saw worth instead of worthlessness. It should have felt like a fairy tale, like the happy ending my mother's stories had promised. But fairy tales didn't prepare you for the complicated reality of being saved, didn't explain what it meant when someone powerful looked at you with desperate need in their eyes, didn't warn you about the way gratitude could twist into something more, something dangerous, something that felt almost like, no. I cut off that thought before it could fully form. This wasn't a love story. This was survival, mutual desperation, two lonely people finding temporary comfort in each other's existence. In 3 days, the novelty would wear off. Davian would remember he was king and I was nobody. The gap between us would become visible again, and I'd find my place here, probably in the kitchens or the gardens, somewhere a wolfless Omega could be useful without causing trouble. This moment, this feeling of being wanted, of being important, was temporary. I needed to remember that, even as part of me whispered, "What if it's not?" I woke to screaming for a disorienting moment. I couldn't place where I was. Then memory crashed back the palace, the king's chambers, the borrowed bed in the converted sitting room, and the screaming was coming from Dave's room. I was moving before conscious thought caught up, stumbling through the connecting door in my nightgown. The king's chamber was dark except for the dying embers in the fireplace and in the massive bed. Davian thrashed like he was fighting for his life. "No," the word tore from his throat, raw with terror. "Please, no, nightmare." He was having a nightmare. I approached the bed cautiously, remembering Captain Thessa's warnings about waking a sleeping shifter. They could strike out on instinct, not recognizing friend from foe. But Davian's face was twisted with agony, and something in me couldn't bear to watch him suffer. "Davidan," I said softly, stopping just out of reach. "It's okay. You're safe. It's just a dream." He didn't hear me, didn't stop thrashing. His breathing was rapid and shallow, and I could see fresh blood seeping through his bandages, where his movements had torn his stitches. Damn the caution. I climbed onto the bed and reached for his face, cupping it gently between my hands. "Davian, wake up. You're safe. I'm here." His eyes snapped open, wild, golden, unseeing. For a heartbeat, I thought he'd strike me. His hand moved lightning fast, catching my wrist in a grip that would bruise. Then recognition flooded his features. "Dorothy." His voice was disoriented. "What? You were having a nightmare?" I said softly, not trying to pull away from his grip. "You were screaming." Shame flickered across his face. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you. He stopped, finally registering our positions. Me on his bed, my hands on his face, his hand around my wrist. "You shouldn't be here. You were hurting yourself," I said, gesturing to the fresh blood on his bandages. "Your stitches tore. I heal fast. It's fine." "It's not fine." I finally pulled my wrist free and moved to examine the damage. "You're going to make everything worse if you keep thrashing like that. What were you dreaming about?" Davian went very still. "The attack. The hunters dying alone in the snow." His voice dropped to barely a whisper, thinking that was how it would end, that no one would find me, that I'd die as the king, not as me. The vulnerability in those words made my chest ache. I carefully peeled back his bandages, checking the stitches. 2 had torn, but not badly. I could fix this. "Stay still," I ordered, moving to the wash basin to clean my hands. "I need to restitch these." "Dorothy, it's the middle of the night." "You don't have to." I said stay still. I gathered what I needed. Needle, thread, cloth. "You claimed me, remember? That means you're stuck with me, fussing over you, whether you like it or not." A sound escaped him, half laugh, half something else. "I'm the king. I don't take orders. Right now, you're my patient." I returned to the bed and settled beside him. And patients do what their healers tell them. "Now hold still before you make this worse." His eyes met mine, and in them I saw wonder. Like he couldn't quite believe I was real. Like he was afraid if he blinked, I'd disappear. I worked in silence, my hands steady despite the intimacy of the situation. Despite the way my nightgown had ridden up, revealing too much leg, despite the fact that I was on the Alpha King's bed in his private chambers at night alone. This should have been terrifying. This should have made every warning bell in my head scream. Instead, it felt right, like this was where I was supposed to be. Done, I said, finally, tying off the last stitch. Try not to tear these again. I'm running out of thread. Dave caught my hand before I could move away. His grip was gentle now, asking rather than demanding. Stay, Davian! Please. The word came out broken. Just until I fall asleep. I don't want to be alone with the nightmares. I should say no. Should return to my borrowed bed and maintain whatever boundaries still existed between us. Should remember that he was king and I was nobody. And this couldn't end well. But his hand was warm around mine, and his eyes held that same desperate loneliness I saw in my own reflection every morning. And I was so tired of being the person who did what she should instead of what she wanted. Okay, I whispered, until you fall asleep. I settled beside him, careful not to jar his injuries. Davian's hand stayed in mine, his thumb tracing absent patterns across my knuckles. Neither of us spoke. We just lay there in the darkness, two broken people finding comfort in not being alone. His breathing gradually evened out, his grip on my hand relaxed, and finally, he slept peaceful this time, without the nightmares. I should leave. Should go back to my room now that he'd fallen asleep. Instead, I stayed. My eyes drifted closed, and in the warmth of the king's chambers, with his hands still holding mine, I fell asleep, feeling something I'd never felt before. Safe, wanted, home. Chapter 6. The Truth Between Us. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows, and the immediate mortifying realization that I was still in the king's bed. Not just in his bed, curled against his side, my head resting on his chest, his arm wrapped protectively around me like I belonged there. Our legs were tangled together beneath silk sheets, and I could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath my cheek, the rise and fall of his breathing. This was bad. This was so bad. I tried to ease away carefully to extract myself without waking him, but the moment I moved, Davian's arm tightened around me. Don't. His voice was rough with sleep, but there was no mistaking the command in it. Stay, please. Someone could come in, I whispered, my face burning. They'll see. Let them see. His hand moved to stroke my hair, the gesture so tender it made my throat tight. You're under my protection. That means you're allowed to be wherever I want you to be. That's not how this works. There are rules, protocol. People will talk. People always talk. Davian's chest rumbled with the words. Let me worry about that right now. Just stay a few more minutes. That's all I'm asking. I should refuse. Should maintain boundaries that were already dangerously blurred. But his warmth was seeping into me, melting away the chronic cold I'd carried my entire life. And his hand in my hair felt like safety, like being cherished, like something I'd never known I was missing until now. A few more minutes, I agreed quietly. We lay there in the golden morning light, neither of us speaking. Outside, I could hear the palace waking servants moving through the corridors, guards changing shifts, the distant clatter of breakfast preparations, the world continuing on, oblivious to the impossible thing happening in the king's chambers. I didn't have nightmares, Dave said finally, his voice quiet. Last night after you came, I just slept peacefully. I can't remember the last time that happened. You were exhausted. You'd been wounded and traveled all day. It wasn't the exhaustion. His arm tightened around me. It was you knowing you were there, knowing I wasn't alone. It made the darkness less dark. I lifted my head to look at him. His golden eyes were already on me, and the intensity in them stole my breath. This wasn't gratitude. This was something else, something deeper and more dangerous. Davian, I said carefully. What are we doing? I don't know. His hand came up to cut my face, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone. I've been king for 10 years. I know strategy, politics, warfare. I know how to read people, how to anticipate their moves, how to stay 3 steps ahead of everyone around me. But this you, I don't know what this is. I just know I don't want it to stop. I'm nobody, I whispered. A wolfless omega from a backwater pack. You're the king. This can't. There's no future where this makes sense. Maybe not. His thumb traced my lower lip, and heat pulled in my stomach. But right now, in this moment, it makes perfect sense. You saved my life. Oh, you carried me through a blizzard when you had no reason to care whether I lived or died. You looked at me and saw something worth saving. How am I supposed to let that go? You don't have to let it go. You can keep me here under your protection. I'll be grateful for that. I'll serve you however you need. But this, I gestured between us. Whatever this is becoming, it's going to hurt us both when reality catches up. What if I don't care? Davian's voice was fierce. What if I'm tired of doing what makes sense? What if I want something just for me, just for once, regardless of whether it's wise or practical or appropriate? Then you'll regret it, I said quietly. When your advisors remind you that a king needs a queen who can strengthen alliances, when the nobles expect you to mate with someone who can shift, who can give you heirs, when you realize that keeping me here like this is just going to make everything more complicated. Dave was quiet for a long moment. Then he sat up, careful of his injuries, and looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. There's something you should know, he said, about why I was in your territory, about what happened before the hunters attacked. Dread pulled in my stomach. What? I was running away. The words came out flat. Matter of fact, from the palace, from my responsibilities, from a wedding that was supposed to happen in 2 weeks. The world tilted. A wedding to Princess Abigail of the Eastern Territories. It's been arranged for months. A political alliance to unite the Eastern and Northern packs. Davian's jaw tightened. I've met her 3 times. She's beautiful, accomplished, politically savvy, everything a queen should be, and I feel absolutely nothing when I look at her. I should have expected this, should have known that a king wouldn't be unattached, but hearing it still felt like a physical blow. So you ran, I said quietly. I ran. He laughed bitterly like a coward. I shifted and just ran. Didn't tell anyone where I was going. Didn't bring guards. Just needed to feel something other than trapped. And that's when the hunters found me. And I found you. And you saved me. His eyes met mine. And now I'm back here. And the wedding is still supposed to happen. And I still feel nothing for her. Except now I feel everything for you. And I don't know what to do about it. The confession hung in the air between us. Too honest. Too raw. Too dangerous. You marry her, I said. Each word like swallowing glass. Because that's what kings do. They make sacrifices for their kingdoms, and you keep me here as whatever you want me to be. A friend, a companion, someone who reminds you that you're more than just a crown. But you marry her, because that's what makes sense. I don't want to make sense. Dave's voice was rough. I want to be selfish. I want to claim you properly. Want to make you mine in every way that matters. Want to wake up every morning with you in my arms, and not care what anyone thinks about it. You can't. My throat was tight with tears I refused to shed. You're the king. You don't get to be selfish. Then what was the point? The anguish in his voice made my chest ache. What was the point of surviving, of being saved, if I just go back to being trapped? If I marry someone I don't love and spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been? I didn't have an answer because he was right. It wasn't fair. None of this was fair. But fairness didn't change reality. A sharp knock on the door made us both jump. Your Majesty, Captain Thessa's voice, brisk and professional. The council is requesting your presence. They've heard about your return, and they have questions about me. She meant they had questions about me. Davian's expression hardened. Tell them I'll attend after I've bathed and eaten. And Captain, the girl stays in my chambers. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. A pause. Then as you command, Your Majesty, her footsteps retreated down the corridor. You should go to them, I said quietly. Answer their questions. Do what you need to do as king. I'll stay here. Out of the way. I don't want you out of the way. Davian's hand found mine again, gripping it like a lifeline. I want you beside me. Always. That's not possible. Why not? Because I'm nobody. The words burst out of me. All the frustration and fear and confusion boiling over. Because I can't shift, can't fight, can't do anything that would make me a suitable companion for a king. Because you're supposed to marry a princess, not keep a broken Omega in your chambers, like some kind of Davian kissed me. It was sudden and desperate and absolutely should not have been happening. His hand slid into my hair, tilting my head back, and his mouth claimed mine with a hunger that made every rational thought evaporate. I should push him away, should maintain the last shreds of propriety, should remember all the reasons this was impossible. Instead, I kissed him back, my hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, even as some distant part of my brain screamed that this was madness. He tasted like mourning and desperation, and something wild that called to a part of me I didn't know existed. His kiss was demanding, claiming, saying everything words couldn't. Mine. You're mine. I don't care what makes sense. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. Davian's forehead rested against mine, his eyes closed, his hands still buried in my hair. "Tell me you didn't feel that," he whispered. "Tell me I'm imagining this connection between us. Tell me you don't feel it too, and I'll let you go. I'll marry Abigail and keep you here as a companion and never touch you again. But you have to tell me truthfully. Do you feel nothing for me? I should protect us both from the inevitable heartbreak. Should say the words that would make this easier. But I'd spent my entire life being what other people needed. Being small, being convenient, being forgettable. And I was so tired of lying. I feel everything," I whispered. "And it terrifies me." Davian's eyes opened, blazing with something fierce and triumphant. "Then we find a way. I don't know how yet, but we find a way to make this work, because I'm not losing you. I can't. The council can wait." He stood, pulling me with him. "First we eat, then we bathe, then I'll deal with whatever political nightmare is waiting for me. But you stay with me through all of it. Understood?" It wasn't really a question, but I nodded anyway because some part of me, the part that had dragged him 10 miles through a blizzard, understood stubbornness when she met it. The council chamber was exactly as intimidating as I'd imagined. A massive oval table dominated the room, surrounded by high-backed chairs where the realm's most powerful shifters sat. They turned as one when Davian entered with me at his side, dressed in borrowed clothes that were too fine for someone like me. My hand firmly clasped in his. The silence was deafening. "Your Majesty." An elderly man at the head of the table stood, his silver hair and formal bearing marking him as someone important. "We're relieved to see you alive. When you disappeared, I needed to clear my head." Davian interrupted smoothly, his tone allowing no argument. "I went for a run. I was attacked by hunters. This woman, Dorothy Thorne, saved my life at great personal risk. She carried me 10 miles through a blizzard and treated my wounds when anyone else would have left me to die. She is under my direct protection now, and I expect all of you to treat her with the respect that deserves." The council members exchanged glances. I could feel their assessment, their judgment, their barely concealed disdain. An Omega, a wolfless one at that, sitting at the king's side like she belonged there. "Of course, Your Majesty," the silver-haired man said carefully. "We're grateful to Miss Thorne for her action service. However, there are matters we must discuss regarding your upcoming nuptials. Cancel them." The room went absolutely still. "Your Majesty," the silver-haired man's face had gone pale. "Surely you don't mean—" "I mean exactly what I said." Davian's voice was hard as iron. "Send word to Princess Abigail. Apologize for the inconvenience. Offer whatever political concessions necessary to maintain the alliance, but the wedding is cancelled." "You can't simply cancel a royal wedding." A woman across the table stood, her face flushed with anger. "We've spent months negotiating this alliance. The treaties are signed. The invitations have been sent. You cannot simply, 'I'm the king,'" Dave said quietly. "I can do whatever I want. Not when it comes to destabilizing the realm." The woman's voice rose. "This wedding isn't just about you. It's about uniting territories, strengthening our borders, ensuring peace." Your personal feelings are irrelevant. My personal feelings, Dave said, his voice dropping to something dangerous, are that I will not marry someone I don't love, and I will not sentence myself to a lifetime of misery just to make your political maneuvers easier. So you'd throw away peace for what? An Omega? The woman's eyes flicked to me with undisguised contempt. One who can't even shift, who has nothing to offer but finish that sentence, Davian said softly, and you'll find yourself removed from this council. Permanently, the woman's mouth snapped shut, but her eyes still blazed with fury. The silver-haired man held up his hands. Your Majesty, please, we understand you're grateful to Miss Thorne. We all are. But gratitude is not a foundation for kingdom policy. If you cancel this wedding, the Eastern Territories may see it as an insult. They might. Then I'll deal with the consequences, Dave said firmly. But I will not marry Abigail. That's final. And what will you do instead? Another council member spoke up, a younger man with cold, calculating eyes. Surely you don't intend to. His gaze flicked to me, and disgust flickered across his face. You can't seriously be considering making her careful, Dayan warned. The young man pressed on anyway. She can't shift, Your Majesty. She can't bear children. She has no political connections, no skills that would benefit the realm. What exactly do you think she can offer as everything? Davian's hand tightened around mine. She offers everything that matters. Loyalty, courage, the ability to see me as more than a crown. And that's worth more than all your political alliances combined. The council erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped, arguing, protesting, some begging Dave to reconsider. I sat frozen in my chair, drowning in their words, in their contempt, in the crushing weight of being utterly out of my depth. They were right. I had nothing to offer. I was nothing, a wolfless Omega who'd gotten lucky saving the king's life. What was Davian thinking? Defending me like this? Throwing away a political alliance for someone as worthless as me? Enough. Davian's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Power radiated from him. Not just authority, but something primal. Alpha dominance that made every wolf in the room fall silent instinctively. I understand your concerns, he said, his tone calm but unyielding. And I appreciate that you have the realm's best interests at heart. But my decision is made. The wedding to Princess Abigail is cancelled. I will send formal notification and offer appropriate concessions, and Dorothy Thorne remains under my protection. Those are not up for debate. Your Majesty, however, Davian continued, I will make you a promise. I will not make any permanent decisions regarding Miss Thorne until sufficient time has passed. I will consider the realm's needs. I will be thoughtful about the future, but I will not marry someone I don't love. And I will not cast out the woman who saved my life. That's the best compromise you're getting. The council members exchanged glances. It wasn't what they wanted, but it was something. A concession that suggested Davian was willing to be reasonable, even if he was being stubborn. The silver-haired man sighed. Very well, Your Majesty. We will adapt. But please consider carefully. The realm needs stability, needs heirs, needs heirs. I know what it needs, Davian said quietly. Give me time to figure out how to provide it. The meeting continued for another hour. Discussions about the hunters who'd attacked Davian, about border security, about trade agreements and territorial disputes. I sat silently through all of it, hyper-aware of every contemptuous glance, every whispered comment, every reminder that I didn't belong here. When it finally ended, Davian led me back to his chambers in silence. The moment the door closed behind us, he pulled me into his arms, burying his face in my hair. I'm sorry, he whispered. I should have prepared you for that. Should have warned you how they'd react. They're right, I said, my voice muffled against his chest. I don't have anything to offer. I'm nobody. Stop saying that. Dave pulled back, his hands framing my face. You're not nobody. You're the woman who saved my life, who carried me through a blizzard, who looks at me and sees me. Not the crown. That's everything, Dorothy. Everything. It's not enough for a king. Then maybe I don't want to be king. The words hung between us. Impossible, reckless, terrifying. "You don't mean that," I whispered. "Don't I?" His eyes blazed. "I've been king for 10 years. 10 years of sacrifice and duty and putting everyone else's needs before my own. When do I get to be selfish? When do I get to choose what I want? Not when choosing what you want could destabilize the realm. Not when it means throwing away political alliances. Not when. Then what was the point?" Dave's voice broke. "What was the point of you saving me if I just go back to being trapped? If I spend the rest of my life wishing I'd died in that snow, because at least then I wouldn't know what I was missing?" Tears burned in my eyes. "I saved you because you deserved to live. Not because I expected anything in return, not because I thought we'd finish the sentence. Couldn't name this thing growing between us. Too fragile and impossible to survive reality." "I know," Dave whispered. "I know you didn't expect this. Neither did I. But it's here now, and I don't know how to let it go." "You have to." The words hurt coming out. "You're the king. You have responsibilities. And I'm just the girl who happened to be in the right place at the right time. We can be friends. I can stay here under your protection. But this us, it can't be more than that. Why not?" "Because I love you too much to let you destroy yourself for me." The confession escaped before I could stop it. Davian went very still, his eyes widening with shock, and something that looked like wonder. "Say that again," he breathed. "No." I tried to pull away, but his hands tightened on my face. "I shouldn't have said it." "Forget I say it again, Dorothy." I closed my eyes, tears spilling down my cheeks. "I love you, and that's exactly why we can't do this. Because I won't let you sacrifice everything for someone like me. I won't be the reason the realm falls apart. I won't." He kissed me again, softer this time, but no less devastating. When he pulled back, his own eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I love you too," he whispered. "And I know that's terrifying. I know it's impossible, but it's true. And I'd rather spend 1 year with you and lose the crown than spend 50 years without you and keep it." "Don't say that. Please don't say that." "Then tell me how to make this work. Tell me how to keep you and keep the kingdom, because I can't." His voice broke. "I can't lose you. Not now. Not after finally finding you." I didn't have an answer, because there was no answer. He was king. I was nobody. And sometimes love wasn't enough. We stood there in his chambers, holding each other while the sun climbed higher in the sky, and reality pressed against the windows like a living thing. Tomorrow would come. The council would return. Princess Abigail would hear about the cancelled wedding. The realm would have opinions about the wolfless Omega living in the king's chambers. But for now, in this moment, we had each other. And maybe, just maybe, we could figure out how to make that enough. Chapter 7. 3 weeks passed in a strange sort of limbo. Davian cancelled the wedding to Princess Abigail. The political fallout was exactly as bad as the council had predicted. Angry letters from the Eastern Territories, whispered accusations of instability, nobles circling like vultures sensing weakness. But Dave held firm, enduring every criticism, every veiled threat, every reminder that he was putting his personal desires above the realm's needs. And through it all, I stayed. I stayed in the chambers connected to his. I stayed at his side during council meetings, enduring the contemptuous stares and barely concealed hostility. I stayed awake beside him when the nightmares came, stroking his hair until he could sleep peacefully again. I stayed even though every rational part of me screamed that this couldn't last, that eventually something would have to give. We didn't discuss the future, didn't talk about what we were to each other, what this arrangement meant, how long it could possibly continue. We existed in stolen moments, late-night conversations in his chambers, shared meals when we could escape the palace's demands, quiet mornings when I'd wake to find him watching me like I was something precious. It felt like borrowed time, like a dream I'd wake from at any moment. And then Princess Abigail arrived. I was in the library, Davian's gift to me, a room filled with more books than I could read in 10 lifetimes when Captain Thessa found me. "She's here," the captain said without preamble. Princess Abigail. She arrived an hour ago and demanded an audience with the king. My stomach dropped. Why would she come here? The wedding's cancelled. What could she possibly? She's refusing to accept the cancellation. Captain Thessa's expression was grim. She's claiming that the king was clearly not in his right mind when he made that decision, that he was recovering from a near-death experience and not thinking clearly. She's asking the council to override his decision. Can she do that? Legally, no. The king's word is law. But politically, Captain Thessa's jaw tightened. She has powerful allies. If enough of the council supports her claim, it could create a crisis. Dave might be forced to choose between you and civil war. The words hit like a physical blow. Civil war because of me. Because a wolfless Omega had dared to save the king's life and had somehow become important to him. I need to leave, I said, standing on shaky legs. If I'm not here, the problem goes away. He can marry her, secure the alliance. That's not what the king wants. It doesn't matter what he wants. The words burst out of me, all the fear and guilt I've been carrying for 3 weeks finally breaking through. He's the king. He has responsibilities, and I'm just making everything worse by being here. Captain Thessa studied me for a long moment. You really love him, don't you? The question stole my breath. I don't lie to me. I've been watching you two for weeks. I see how you look at him, how he looks at you, and I see how terrified you are that you're going to destroy him. She moved closer, her voice softening. You're not wrong to be afraid. This situation is impossible, but running away won't fix it. It'll just break you both. Better broken than dead, I whispered. Better broken than watching the realm tear itself apart because he chose me. Is it? Captain Thessa asked. Because from where I'm standing, you two have something rare, something worth fighting for, and if you run now, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what could have been. I already know what could have been. Nothing. We could have been nothing, because that's all we were ever going to be. I'm nobody, Captain. A wolfless Omega from a backwater pack. And he's the king. There was never a future where this worked. Before Captain Thessa could respond, the library door burst open. A young servant stood there, breathless and pale. Miss Thorne, she gasped. The king requests your presence in the throne room immediately. Dread coiled in my stomach. Why? Princess Abigail wishes to meet you. The throne room was more intimidating than the council chamber. Massive marble columns supported a vated ceiling painted with scenes of wolf battles and conquests. The throne itself, carved from a single piece of black stone, sat on a raised dais at the far end, and filling the space between were nobles, council members, guards, and what looked like half the palace staff, all gathered to witness whatever was about to happen. Davian sat on his throne, his posture rigid with tension. He was dressed formally black and silver that emphasized his authority, his power, the vast distance between him and everyone else in the room. His eyes found mine the moment I entered, and I saw apology there, and fear. He didn't want this, but he couldn't stop it. Standing before the throne, radiant in a gown that probably cost more than my entire village, was Princess Abigail. She was beautiful, devastatingly so. Golden hair that caught the light like spun honey, perfect features that belonged on a painting, a figure that would make any wolf howl with appreciation. And most importantly, I could see it in the way power radiated from her. She could shift, could give Dave airs, could be everything a queen was supposed to be, everything I wasn't. Ah, she said as I approached, her voice melodious and cultured. The little Omega, how quaint. The condescension in her tone made every person in the room flinch. But I kept my head high, kept walking until I stood beside Davian's throne, where I'd stood for 3 weeks, where I'd somehow come to feel like I belonged despite all evidence to the contrary. Princess Abigail, Davian said, his voice carefully neutral. This is Dorothy Thorne. She saved my life. So I've heard. Abigail's eyes swept over me, cataloging every flaw, every inadequacy. How very fortunate for you, Your Majesty. though I must say, the rumors undersold how simple she is. I'd expected someone more impressive given the circumstances. Simple, the word was chosen carefully, not quite an insult, but close enough to sting. Miss Thorne showed extraordinary courage, Davian said, his tone hardening. She carried me 10 miles through a blizzard, treated my wounds, and saved my life when anyone else would have left me to die. I'd say that's fairly impressive. Oh, I don't doubt her physical capabilities. Abigail's smile was sharp, though one does wonder if gratitude is being confused with something else. After all, Your Majesty, you were gravely injured, barely conscious. Surely, you couldn't have been thinking clearly during your recovery, and decisions made under duress. She let the sentence hang, pregnant with implication. The throne room went utterly silent. Are you suggesting, Davian said softly, dangerously, that I don't know my own mind? I'm suggesting that you were traumatized, that you formed an understandable attachment to your rescuer, and that perhaps in your gratitude, you made some impulsive decisions that you're now finding difficult to reverse? Abigail's eyes never left his face. The wedding can still happen, Your Majesty. I'm willing to forgive this indiscretion. We can put this unpleasantness behind us and move forward with our original arrangement. There was no indiscretion, Davian said, his voice like iron. And I'm not interested in moving forward with any arrangement because of her. For the first time, Abigail's composure cracked slightly. She looked at me with genuine confusion. Your Majesty, I mean no disrespect to Miss Thorne's heroism, but surely you see that she's entirely unsuitable as anything more than a companion, a friend. She can't shift, can't bear children, can't offer your kingdom anything that would justify the political chaos you've created. Every word was true. Every word drove itself into my chest like a blade. She offers me herself, Davian said quietly. That's enough. It's not. Abigail's voice rose, losing its careful modulation. You're the king. You need a queen who can stand beside you. Who can produce heirs to secure the succession? Who can forge alliances and strengthen the realm? What can she do? Read books, tell stories, keep you company at night. The implication hung in the air, ugly and inescapable. Careful, princess, Davian warned. But Abigail was past caution now. She turned to me directly, her beautiful face twisted with something like desperation. You must see this is impossible, that you're ruining him, that every day you stay here, you're making him weaker in the eyes of his people. The nobles whisper that he's been bewitched. The council questions his judgment. The Eastern territories talk of war. All because of you. The words landed like physical blows because they were true. All of it was true. I'm right, aren't I? Abigail's voice softened, became almost kind. You love him. I can see it in your eyes. And if you truly love him, you'll do what's best for him. You'll leave. You'll let him marry me and secure his kingdom and be the king he's meant to be, because continuing this fantasy is only going to destroy him. The throne room was so quiet, I could hear my own heartbeat. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me, waiting to see what the wolfless Omega would do when faced with truth. I looked at Davian, at his golden eyes, fierce and desperate, and silently begging me not to believe her. At his hands, white-knuckled on the throne's armrests, fighting not to reach for me. At the man who'd claimed me, protected me, loved me, despite every rational reason not to. And I knew what I had to do. You're right, I said quietly. Davian's face went white. Dorothy, you're right, I said again, louder this time. To Abigail, to the council, to everyone watching this impossible situation finally reach its inevitable conclusion. I am ruining him. Every day I stay here, I make things worse. And my voice cracked, but I forced the words out. I can't do that to him. I can't watch him destroy himself for me. No. Davian stood, his authority forgotten. Dorothy, don't. I'll leave, I continued, speaking over him. Because if I stopped, if I let him argue, I'd never find the strength to do this. Tonight, I'll go back to Thorn Ridge, or somewhere else. somewhere far enough that no one will associate me with you anymore. The scandal will die down. You can marry Princess Abigail. You can be the king your people need. I don't want to be the king they need. Dave's voice broke with anguish. I want to be with you. Sometimes we don't get what we want. Tears streamed down my face, but I kept my voice steady. Sometimes we have to do what's right instead. And this us, it was never right. It was just borrowed time. A beautiful dream that was always going to end. I turned to Abigail, who was watching with satisfaction barely concealed. You win, princess. Marry him. Be his queen. Give him the heirs he needs. Just my voice finally broke. Just make him happy. Please. He deserves to be happy. Dorothy, stop. Davian was down from the throne now, reaching for me. You're not leaving. I won't let you. You don't have a choice. I stepped back, putting distance between us. If he touched me, if he held me, I'd break. I'd lose what little courage I'd managed to scrape together. I'm not yours to command anymore. I'm leaving, and you're going to let me go because it's the right thing to do, because you're a good man and a good king, and you know I'm right. I don't care about being right. Davian's voice was ragged. I care about you. I love you. I love you too. The words were barely a whisper. That's why I'm leaving. I turned and walked toward the throne room doors, each step feeling like dying. Behind me, I heard Davian trying to follow, heard Captain Thessa intercepting him, heard his anguished protest. But I didn't look back. Couldn't look back, because if I did, I'd run to him. I'd let him keep me despite the cost. And I loved him too much for that. I made it to the chambers. His chambers. The room that had become home before the tears truly came. I collapsed on the bed we'd shared, the bed where I'd held him through nightmares, and woken to his arms around me and let the grief pour out. Great heaving sobs that shook my entire body, that felt like they'd tear me apart from the inside. I'd done the right thing. I knew I'd done the right thing. So why did it hurt so much? I don't know how long I lay there drowning in misery. Hours, maybe. Long enough for the sun to set, for darkness to press against the windows. Long enough for my tears to run dry, leaving only hollow emptiness behind. A knock on the door. Miss Thorne, a servant's voice. Gentle. I have orders to help you pack. There's a carriage waiting to take you wherever you wish to go. Right. Because Davian was efficient, even in heartbreak. He'd make sure I was taken care of even as I walked away from him. Thank you, I called back, my voice. I'll be ready soon. I gathered my few belongings, the books Davian had insisted I take, the clothes he'd given me. Small treasures from 3 weeks of borrowed happiness. It all fit in a single trunk. My entire life with him, reduced to what I could carry. I was fastening the trunk when the door opened. The carriages. I turned, expecting the servant. It was Davian. He looked wrecked. His formal clothes were disheveled, his hair a mess, like he'd been running his hands through it. His eyes were red-rimmed and haunted. Don't go, he said simply. Davidan, please. He crossed the room in 3 strides, his hands framing my face. I know what you think you're doing. I know you think you're saving me. But you're not. You're killing me. Dorothy, please. You have to let me go. Fresh tears spilled down my cheeks. You have to marry Abigail. You have to. I can't. His voice broke. I can't marry her. I can't wake up every day knowing you're somewhere out there alone, thinking you weren't worth fighting for. I can't. He pulled me against him, his whole body shaking. I love you. I love you. And I don't know how to let you go. You have to, I whispered into his chest. For both of us. Because if I stay, you'll lose your kingdom. And if you lose your kingdom because of me, I'll never forgive myself. Then we'll lose it together. His arms tightened around me. We'll leave tonight. We'll run and we'll keep running and we'll find somewhere no one knows us. Somewhere we can just be. The fantasy was so tempting, so beautiful. Run away with him. Leave the crown behind. Start over somewhere new. Somewhere our impossible love might actually work. But it was just that, a fantasy. You'd regret it, I said quietly. Maybe not tomorrow, or next week, or even next year. But eventually you'd regret it. You'd miss being king. You'd wonder about the kingdom you abandoned, and you'd look at me and realize I wasn't worth it. That would never happen. You don't know that. You can't know that. I pulled back enough to look at his face, memorizing every detail. The golden eyes, the strong jaw, the lips that had kissed me like I was something precious. And I can't live with that uncertainty. Can't spend the rest of my life waiting for you to regret choosing me. Dorothy, let me go, I whispered. Please, if you love me at all, let me go. For a long moment, Davian just held me. Then slowly, painfully, his arms loosened. He stepped back, his face a mask of devastation. I'll always love you, he said hoarsely. Always. No matter what happens. No matter who I marry, or how much time passes. You were the one, Dorothy. The only one who ever really saw me. I know, I whispered. You are mine too. One last look. One last moment of being in the same room, breathing the same air, existing in the same space. Then I picked up my trunk and walked away from the only man I'd ever loved. The carriage was waiting, just as promised. I climbed in without looking back at the palace, at the windows that might have held Dave watching me leave. If I looked, I'd break. If I looked, I'd run back to him and damn the consequences. Where to, miss? The driver asked. Where to? I had no home in Thornage anymore. No place that would welcome a wolfless Omega who dared to reach above her station. Anywhere, I said quietly. Just drive. The carriage lurched forward, carrying me away from the palace, away from the capital, away from the impossible love that had bloomed in a barn and withered under the weight of reality. I'd done the right thing. I'd saved Devine from his own heart. I'd protected the realm from the chaos our love would have caused. So why did doing the right thing feel exactly like dying? The carriage had barely reached the city gates when we stopped. What's wrong? I called to the driver. No answer. Then the door opened and Captain Thessa climbed in. Get out, she said. I blinked. What? Get out of the carriage, Miss Thorne. Now confused, I obeyed. Captain Thessa grabbed my trunk and handed it to another guard, then took my arm and began marching me back toward the palace. I don't understand, I said. I'm leaving. I agreed to leave. What? You're not leaving? Captain Thessa's grip was firm, but not unkind because approximately 3 minutes after you walked out, the king collapsed, just fell to his knees in the middle of his chambers and started shifting uncontrollably between human and wolf, over and over, like he couldn't control it. Horror flooded through me. Is he? The healers are with him now. They say it's a reaction to extreme emotional trauma, that his wolf is fighting him because you left, that if the shifting doesn't stop soon, it could kill him. The world tilted. No, that's not. I was trying to save him. You were trying to save him from scandal, from political complications, from having to choose between love and duty. Captain Thessa stopped, forcing me to look at her. But you forgot something important, Miss Thorne. He already made his choice 3 weeks ago, when he claimed you, when he canceled his wedding, when he told his entire council that you were worth more than political alliances. And by leaving, by making that choice for him, you're killing him just as surely as those hunter's arrows would have. I don't. What am I supposed to do? You're supposed to go back to him. You're supposed to let him love you publicly and completely, and damn the consequences because that's the only way he survives this. Captain Thessa's expression softened. I know you think you're protecting him. I know you love him enough to sacrifice your own happiness. But sometimes, Miss Thorne, the bravest thing you can do is let yourself be loved. Even when it's complicated, even when it's impossible, even when it scares you. She was right. Moon Goddess helped me. She was right. I'd been so focused on doing what I thought was noble, what I thought would save him, that I'd forgotten the most important thing. Dave had already chosen. He'd made his decision, claimed me in front of his entire council, stood against political pressure for 3 weeks, and I just erased that choice, decided I knew better than him what he needed, treated him like a child who couldn't be trusted with his own heart. Take me back, I whispered. Please take me back to him. Captain Thessa smiled. Already moving, we ran through the palace corridors, my trunk forgotten, guards scrambling out of our way. When we burst into Davian's chambers, I found them crowded with healers, surrounding a figure on the floor who was shifting wolf to man, man to wolf, over and over, in a painful cycle that made my chest ache. Davian. I pushed through the healers, dropping to my knees beside him. Davian, I'm here. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. His shifting stuttered. Golden eyes. Man's eyes in a wolf's face fixed on me with desperate hope. I'm not leaving, I said, taking his half-shifted head in my hands. I'm never leaving. I was wrong. I was so wrong. You chose me, and I should have trusted that. Should have believed you knew what you wanted. I'm sorry. The shifting slowed, stopped. Davian's form settled back into human, and he collapsed against me, his whole body shaking. Don't leave, he gasped. Please, Dorothy, don't ever, never, I promised, holding him tight. I'm never leaving you again. I swear it around us. The healers exchanged glances. One of them, an elderly woman with kind eyes, smiled slightly. Well, she said, that's one way to cure emotional trauma, though I'd recommend less dramatic methods in the future. I laughed, the sound verging on hysterical noted. Dave's arms wrapped around me, and for the first time in hours, I felt like I could breathe again, like the world had snapped back into place. I love you, he whispered, and I don't care what it costs. I don't care what they say. You're mine, and I'm keeping you. I love you too, I whispered back. And I'm sorry I tried to make that choice for you. I won't do it again. Promise? Promise? Promise. We stayed there on the floor, holding each other, while the healers filtered out and left us alone. Eventually, Davian pulled back enough to look at me. Marry me, he said. I froze. What? Marry me? His eyes were fierce, determined. Not because it's practical or politically wise, or because anyone expects it. Marry me because I love you, and you love me, and we're done letting fear make our decisions. Marry me, Dorothy. You need a queen who canes us. I need you. He interrupted everything else. We'll figure out together, but I need you beside me officially and permanently, or I'm going to lose my mind. So marry me, please. It was insane, impossible. Every rational argument still applied. I couldn't shift, couldn't bear children, couldn't be the queen, in the realm expected. But looking into his eyes, seeing the absolute certainty there, I realized something important. Sometimes love wasn't about being practical. Sometimes it was about choosing each other, over and over, despite every obstacle. Sometimes the bravest thing you could do was say yes to something impossible, and trust that you'd find a way to make it work. Yes, I whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Davian's face lit with joy so pure it took my breath away. He kissed me deep and claiming and full of promise. And I kissed him back, pouring every ounce of love and hope and terrified determination into it. We'd figure it out somehow. We'd make this work. We had to because the alternative, living without each other, was no longer an option. Chapter 8. The Coronation of Broken Things. The announcement of our engagement sent shockwaves through the realm. Princess Abigail left the capital. The same night, her departing words a thinly veiled threat about the Eastern Territories remembering this insult. Half the council resigned in protest. Nobles who'd spent years cultivating relationships with Davian suddenly found reasons to return to their home territories. Letters poured in from across the realm, some supportive, most scathing, all of them making it clear that the Alpha King marrying a wolfless Omega was unprecedented, inappropriate, and potentially disastrous. Dave read each one with the same expression of grim determination, then filed them away without response. "Let them be angry," he said when I found him late one night, surrounded by complaints and threats. "They'll adapt eventually, or they won't. Either way, I'm not changing my mind, Davian." I moved behind his chair, my hands settling on his shoulders. "Maybe we should reconsider, not cancel the engagement," I added quickly when his muscles tensed beneath my touch. "Just delay it. Give people time to adjust. Give the realm time to unto us. No. His hand came up to cover mine. Every day we wait is another day they think they can change my mind. Another day you're living in uncertainty, wondering if I'm going to wake up and realize this was a mistake. I won't do that to you. I trust you, I said quietly. Then trust me about this. He pulled me around to face him, his eyes intense. In 2 weeks, you're going to stand beside me in front of the entire realm. You're going to become my queen, and anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. 2 weeks, 14 days until I became something I'd never imagined possible. Queen Luna, mate to the most powerful shifter in the Northern Territories, the girl who couldn't shift, elevated to the highest position in the land. It should have felt like a triumph. Instead, it felt like standing on the edge of a precipice, waiting to fall. The wedding preparations were a nightmare. Dressed in silk and flowers, seamstresses arrived to measure me for a gown, their faces carefully neutral as they worked around my non-shifter body. No tail to account for in partial shifts, no claws that might tear delicate fabric, just a human-shaped woman who'd somehow captured the king's heart. "You'll be beautiful, Miss Thorne," the head seamstress said kindly, though I caught the doubt in her eyes. Beautiful, perhaps, but would beautiful be enough? The ceremony itself was being planned down to the smallest detail. A royal wedding hadn't happened in 15 years, and everyone seemed determined to make this one perfect, or as perfect as possible, given the controversial nature of the bride. "You'll need to learn the traditional vows." Lady Helena, the palace's protocol master, informed me during one particularly grueling preparation session. She was a stern woman in her 60s, who'd served 3 generations of royalty and clearly thought Dave had lost his mind. "They're in the old language, quite complex. Most queens spend months memorizing them." "I have 2 weeks," I said, looking at the phonetically written text she'd provided. The symbols swam before my eyes, ancient and incomprehensible. "Yes. Well," Lady Helena's tone suggested this was exactly the sort of problem one encountered when marrying inappropriate omegas. "Do your best, dear. No one expects perfection from someone in your position." The condescension stung, but I bit my tongue. Getting angry wouldn't help. I just had to prove I could do this. Could be what Davian needed. Could be worthy of the faith he'd placed in me. I studied those vows until my eyes burned. Practiced the pronunciation until the foreign syllables felt almost natural in my mouth. Davian would find me late at night, still hunched over the text, and pull me away. "You don't have to be perfect," he'd remind me, his arms wrapping around me from behind. "You just have to be you." What if that's not enough? The fear kept surfacing. No matter how many times he reassured me, what if I mess up the vows, or trip walking down the aisle, or then we'll laugh about it later? His lips brushed my temple. "Dorothy, the ceremony doesn't matter. The politics don't matter. The only thing that matters is that at the end of it, you're my wife, my mate, my queen. Everything else is just noise." I wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that love alone could overcome every obstacle we'd face. But doubt gnawed at me, persistent and poisonous. 5 days before the wedding, a delegation arrived from the Eastern Territories. They requested a formal audience with Davian, and protocol demanded he grant it. I stood beside his throne, my place now, despite the scandalized looks it still generated, and watched as Princess Abigail's father, Duke Aldrich of the Eastern Reaches, approached with cold fury in his eyes. "Your Majesty," he said, his bow barely deep enough to be respectful, "we come seeking clarification regarding certain decisions you've made." "Speak plainly, Duke," Davian replied, his tone neutral. "You've broken a contract, a sacred agreement between our territories. My daughter was promised to you, treaties were signed, concessions were made, and you've thrown it all away," for his eyes flicked to me with undisguised contempt. For this, the throne room went silent. "Miss Thorne has a name," Davian said quietly. "Use it, Miss Thorne." Duke Aldrich's spat is nobody, a wolfless omega with nothing to recommend her except that she happened to be in the right place at the right time. "You're throwing away a strategic alliance for a woman who can't even shift." "I'm throwing away nothing," Davian said, his voice hardening. I'm choosing my mate, my queen, and I'm choosing her freely, without coercion or political manipulation. If the Eastern territories find that insulting, then perhaps we need to reconsider what kind of alliance we actually had. Without the marriage, there is no alliance. Duke Aldrich's words carried the weight of threat. We've tolerated your independence, Your Majesty. We've allowed you to unite the Northern territories under your rule, but that tolerance has limits. Push us too far, and you'll find yourself facing enemies instead of allies. War. He was threatening war over me. My chest tightened with guilt and fear. This was exactly what I'd tried to prevent by leaving. This was why I'd walked away, to stop this moment from happening. But Dave remained unmoved. If the Eastern territories choose to become enemies over my marriage, then we'll deal with that as it comes. But I will not be threatened into abandoning my mate. That's final. Duke Aldrich's face flushed with rage. You're making a mistake, boy. One you'll regret when careful, Dave interrupted, his voice dropping to something dangerous. You're in my throne room, in my palace, in my territory, and you're threatening my mate. That's a very good way to find yourself removed permanently. The Duke's jaw clenched, but he must have recognized the alpha dominance radiating from Davian. Must have realized he'd pushed as far as he could without actual consequences. We'll remember this, he said finally. When you come begging for our support, we'll remember that you chose a worthless Omega over us. He turned and stormed out, his entourage following. The massive doors slammed behind them, with an echoing boom that seemed to punctuate everything that had just been said. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I should go after them, I heard myself say. I should apologize. Explain that this isn't worth Dorothy. Dave's hand found mine, squeezing firmly. Look at me. I forced my eyes to his face. You are worth it, he said clearly, loudly enough for everyone in the throne room to hear. You're worth every political complication, every angry letter, every territory that threatens to withdraw their support. You saved my life. You showed me what it means to be seen as more than a crown, and I will not apologize for choosing you to anyone ever. The declaration hung in the air, absolute, unshakable. Around us, the courtiers whispered, some with approval, most with doubt. But Dave didn't seem to care. His eyes stayed fixed on mine, asking the question he'd asked so many times before. Do you trust me? I did. Moon God, help me. I did. Okay, I whispered. Okay. The night before our wedding, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the chambers I'd come to think of as mine, still connected to Davian's, still close enough that I could hear him breathing, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow everything would change. Tomorrow I'd stand before the entire realm and vow myself to the Alpha King. Tomorrow I'd become queen. Tomorrow I'd either prove that love could overcome impossible odds, or I'd become the greatest mistake in the kingdom's history. A soft knock on the connecting door. Dorothy, are you awake? Yes, I called back. Davian entered, dressed in loose sleep pants, his hair tousled. He looked younger like this, more vulnerable, less like a king, and more like the wolf I'd found dying in the snow. Can't sleep either? He asked, settling beside me on the bed. Too many thoughts. I shifted to rest my head on his shoulder. What if I mess up the vows tomorrow? What if I trip on my dress? What if? What if the moon falls from the sky? Davian interrupted gently. What if wolves suddenly start flying? What if the entire realm decides to learn interpretive dance? Despite myself, I laughed. Those things are ridiculous. Exactly. So is worrying about tomorrow. Whatever happens, happens. We'll figure it out together. His arm wrapped around me, pulling me closer. I need to tell you something. The seriousness in his tone made my stomach clench. What? I've been king for 10 years. In that time, I've made thousands of decisions. Some good, some bad. All of them necessary. But choosing you, claiming you, loving you, making you my mate, that's the first decision I've made that felt right. Not strategic, not practical, just right. Like the universe finally clicked into place. His hand found mine, threading our fingers together. Tomorrow when you stand beside me, people are going to judge you. They're going to whisper that you're not good enough. that you don't belong, that I've made a terrible mistake. And I need you to know, none of that matters. None of their opinions change what I know to be true, which is, I whispered, that you're the bravest person I've ever met. That you carried a dying wolf 10 miles through a blizzard when any reasonable person would have left him. That you looked at a king and saw a man worth saving. That you love me not despite my crown, but despite every reason you had to walk away. His voice roughened with emotion. You're everything, Dorothy. And tomorrow I get to spend the rest of my life proving that to you. Tears blurred my vision. I'm terrified. Good. So am I. He pressed a kiss to my hair. But we're terrified together. That's what makes it bearable. We lay there in the darkness holding each other, stealing these last few hours before everything changed. And slowly, the fear receded. Not gone, but manageable. Because he was right. We were in this together. Whatever tomorrow brought, we'd face it side by side. The wedding ceremony was held at dawn, as tradition demanded. I dressed in a gown of white silk and silver thread, delicate as moonlight, beautiful in a way that made me feel like an imposter. My hair had been braided with tiny crystals that caught the light. My face had been painted with cosmetics that somehow made me look less like myself, and more like what people expected a queen to be. You're stunning, Captain Thessa said, appearing in the doorway. She'd been assigned as my escort, a gesture of respect and protection. Ready? No, I admitted. But I'm doing it anyway, she smiled. That's all anyone can ask. The processional route took me through the palace and out into the courtyard where hundreds, no, thousands of people had gathered. Citizens from across the realm, nobles in their finest clothes, guards standing at attention, all of them there to witness the controversial marriage that had divided the kingdom. I walked down an aisle of white roses and silver banners, my hands trembling, my heart hammering against my ribs. The crowd's whispers followed me like a physical weight. That's her. She's so ordinary. Can't even shift. I heard. The king's lost his mind. But then I saw him. Davian stood at the end of the aisle dressed in ceremonial black and silver that emphasized his authority and power. But his eyes held only love, only certainty, only the absolute conviction that I belonged beside him. And suddenly the whispers didn't matter. I reached him and he took my hands, his grip warm and steady. Hi, he whispered. Hi, I whispered back. The officiant, an elderly man who'd served the crown for 40 years, began the ceremony. The traditional words flowed over me, ancient and beautiful and heavy with meaning. Then came the vows, the complex phrases in the old language that I'd studied until they'd invaded my dreams. I spoke them carefully, my voice shaking but clear. Each word was a promise. Each phrase was a commitment. When I finished, I saw surprise flicker across several faces in the crowd. I'd pronounced them correctly, hadn't stumbled, hadn't embarrassed him. Then it was Davian's turn. He spoke the vows with absolute confidence, his eyes never leaving mine, and at the end, he added something not in the script. And I vow to protect you, to choose you, to love you beyond reason, and despite every obstacle. For as long as I draw breath, you saved my life, Dorothy Thorne. Now let me spend mine making sure you never regret it. The crowd went utterly silent. Then the officiant cleared his throat. By the power invested in me by the moon goddess herself, I declare you bonded mates, king and queen of the Northern Territories. Davian kissed me deep in claiming and full of promise. And the crowd erupted. Not all cheering. I heard protests mixed with the applause, heard angry voices and skeptical murmurs. But I also heard hope, heard people who'd been inspired by our impossible love, heard those who saw us as proof that worth wasn't determined by birth or ability to shift. We were a symbol now, for better or worse. Ready to face them? Davian murmured against my lips. Together, I whispered back. We turned to face the crowd. King and queen, Alpha and Omega, two broken people who'd somehow found each other and refused to let go. It wouldn't be easy. The Eastern Territories might actually declare war. The nobles might continue their resistance. I'd face criticism and doubt. and constant reminders that I wasn't what a queen should be. But as Davian's hand tightened around mine, I realized something important. I'd spent my whole life trying to prove I was worth something, trying to earn the space I took up in the world, trying to justify my existence through usefulness, through service, through making myself as small and convenient as possible. But I'd saved the king not because I was useful. I'd saved him because he was a life worth saving, and he'd chosen me not because I was convenient. He'd chosen me because I saw him as more than a crown. We'd saved each other, not through grand gestures or perfect planning, just through stubbornness and love and refusal to give up. Maybe that was enough. Maybe we were enough. The crowd began to disperse, heading toward the palace for the feast. But Dave pulled me aside into a small garden alcove away from prying eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked, his hands framing my face. "I'm terrified," I admitted, "but also happy. Is that strange?" "Not strange at all." He kissed my forehead, my cheeks, my lips. "You're my queen now. My mate, mine, yours," I agreed. "And you're mine always." We stood there for a moment, just breathing, just being king and queen, two impossible people in an impossible situation, but also just Davian and Dorothy. The wolf who'd been dying in the snow, and the girl who'd refused to let him die. Everything else was just details. Epilogue. 8 months later, I found Davian in the gardens, standing beneath the oak tree we'd planted on our wedding day. 8 months. It felt like both a lifetime and no time at all. 8 months of learning to be queen, of navigating court politics, of proving to a skeptical realm that a wolfless Omega could stand beside their king. 8 months of late-night council meetings, diplomatic negotiations, and slowly, painfully slowly, earning the respect of those who doubted me. The Eastern Territories hadn't declared war, though the alliance remained fractured. Duke Aldrich had eventually accepted a trade agreement in lieu of the marriage. Though his letters still dripped with thinly veiled contempt, other territories had been more accepting, intrigued by this new queen, who approached problems differently, who saw solutions others missed, because she'd spent her life looking at the world from the outside. It hadn't been easy, would probably never be easy, but we'd survived. "Hey," I said softly, settling beside him on the bench. Dave's arm immediately came around me, pulling me close. This was our ritual, now stolen moments in the garden, away from the demands of ruling, just being together. "Long day?" he asked. Lady Thornwick spent 3 hours arguing that we need to revise the Omega protection laws because they're encouraging laziness. I rolled my eyes. I may have suggested she spend a week living as an Omega before making that judgment. She didn't appreciate it. Dave's chest rumbled with laughter. "I heard about that. Apparently you were quite direct. I'm done being diplomatic with people who think being weak is the same as being lazy." My voice hardened. "If I'm going to be queen, I'm going to actually do something with the position, change things, make life better for Omegas who don't have a king to protect them." "I know," he kissed my temple. "You're magnificent when you're angry." "I'm serious, Dave. There are Omega children being sold to clear family debts. Omega adults being used and discarded. The laws need to change. Then we'll change them." His certainty never wavered. "Draft the proposal. I'll support it. The council will complain, but they'll adapt. They always do." I leaned into him, breathing in his familiar scent, pine and winter, and something uniquely him. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real, that I'm actually your queen, that we made this work. We're making it work," he corrected gently. Present tense. Every day we're choosing each other, choosing this. That's what makes it real. A soft breeze rustled the oak's leaves. Our tree planted to symbolize our commitment. It had grown remarkably fast, already taller than me, its branches spreading wide. The gardeners called it unusual, called it blessed by the moon goddess herself. I just called it proof that impossible things could thrive if given the right conditions. "I have something for you," Dave said suddenly, pulling back to look at me. There was something in his expression, nervous, excited. I couldn't quite read it. What? He produced a small wooden box from his pocket, carved with intricate wolf designs. Open it. Inside, nestled on black velvet, was a silver pendant, a wolf mid-howl, beautifully rendered, suspended from a delicate chain. But what caught my attention wasn't the craftsmanship. It was the inscription on the back. You saved me first. My throat tightened. Davian, the day you carried me through that blizzard, I was dying in more ways than one, he said quietly. Physically, yes, but also spiritually, emotionally. I'd been king for so long, I'd forgotten how to be just me, how to let someone see past the crown to the person underneath. And then you found me, you saved me, not because I was king, but because I was a life worth saving. His hands were gentle as he fastened the pendant around my neck. You saved me first, he repeated, and I wanted you to have a reminder of that. Because I see how you doubt yourself sometimes, how you wonder if you're good enough, if you deserve this. And I need you to remember you've always been good enough, from the moment you chose to drag a dying wolf through a blizzard. You are extraordinary. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I'm not. You are. His thumbs brushed away my tears. You're the woman who changed laws to protect Omegas, who sits in council meetings and argues for those who have no voice, who reads to the palace children every week regardless of their status, who makes me laugh when I'm drowning in responsibility, who holds me when the nightmares come. You're everything, Dorothy. And I need you to believe that I'm trying, I whispered. I know. He pulled me into his arms, holding me like I was precious, and I'll keep reminding you every day for the rest of our lives. We sat there as the sun climbed higher, warming the garden around us. Life continued, servants moving through the palace, guards changing shifts, the distant sounds of the city waking, the realm we ruled together, imperfect and complicated and ours. Tell me something, I said after a while. Do you ever regret it choosing me over an easier path? Dave was quiet for a long moment. Then he shifted, pulling me around to face him fully. Every path is hard, he said. Ruling is hard. Relationships are hard. Life is hard. But when it's hard with the right person, when you're facing obstacles with someone who sees you, who chooses you, who refuses to let you face it alone, it becomes bearable. More than bearable. It becomes worth it. His hand came up to cut my face. I don't regret choosing you. I regret that it took nearly dying for me to find you. I regret the years I spent alone thinking that's what being king meant. I regret every moment before I looked up in that barn and saw you covered in my blood, determined to save me despite every reason to walk away. His voice roughed with emotion. But choosing you, loving you, making you my queen, those are the only decisions I've made that I've never once questioned. Even when Duke Aldrich sends those awful letters, especially then, a fierce smile crossed his face. Because every time someone tries to make me doubt you, I remember who you really are, and I realize they're idiots. I laughed, the sound watery, but genuine. Very diplomatic, Your Majesty. I save diplomacy for people who deserve it. He kissed me softly. You deserve honesty. You deserve to know that you're the best thing that ever happened to me, that every day with you is better than any day before you, that I love you more now than I did on our wedding day, and I'll love you even more tomorrow. The pendant rested against my chest, warm from his touch. You saved me first. I love you too, I whispered. Even when it's scary, even when I don't understand how we made this work, even when I wake up and can't believe this is my life, I love you. Good. His arms tightened around me. Because you're stuck with me now. For better or worse, in political chaos and in peace, in scandal, and in quiet moments like this, you're mine, Dorothy, and I'm never letting you go. Promise? The word came out playful, but I meant it seriously. Promise. He sealed it with a kiss, deep and claiming and full of everything words couldn't express. When we finally pulled apart, the sun was fully up, painting the garden in shades of gold. We'd need to go inside soon, face the council, deal with the day's problems, be king and queen instead of just Davian and Dorothy. But for now, in this moment, we were just us. Two people who'd found each other in the snow, who'd chosen each other despite impossible odds, who were building something beautiful out of the broken pieces of who we'd been. "Come on," Dave said, standing and offering me his hand. "Let's go change the world." I took his hand, letting him pull me to my feet. Together, always together, we walked back toward the palace, hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. King and Queen, Alpha and Omega, two impossible people who'd somehow made an impossible love work. And as we crossed the threshold into our kingdom, I touched the pendant at my throat and smiled. "You saved me first." Maybe so, but the beautiful truth was this: we'd saved each other, and we'd keep saving each other every single day for the rest of our lives. That was the promise we'd made in a barn 8 months ago, the promise we'd renewed with our vows, the promise we kept every time we chose love over convenience, together over easy, impossible over safe. Some promises I'd learned were meant to be kept forever. This was one of them. And that's where Dorothy and Davian's journey ends. Two broken souls who saved each other against all odds. If this story touched your heart, you'll absolutely love Rejected by the Alpha. It's another powerful tale of an Omega who refuses to stay broken, and an Alpha who learns what true strength really means. The cover is on your screen now, and you can find the link in the description below. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, keep believing in impossible love stories.